A couple of just very few housekeeping issues that would like to announce before we get started.
Democracy in West Africa is under attack by practices threatening to overturn constitutions and civil liberties and reduce decades of progress and stability. In Africa, we have a proverb that says, if you see your neighbor's house on fire, better set a drum of water beside yours. But one
accountability instead of unaccountability. I think that's part of the conversations that took place yesterday. Checks and balances, a very big word that came up, instead of arbitrary rule. I guess that's what all of this is about. And to see how we can entrench human rights instead of autocratic regimes, press freedom instead of press constriction, in order to have democratic development and enrichment within our continent. So this is just by way of keeping us in the spirit and getting us back into the loop for today's discussion as far as the broader picture or the big picture is concerned. That is the spirit and the tenor within which the discourse is going to be held today. So we welcome you all back once again, and we look forward to fruitful deliberations. So I'm going to go right away and take the opportunity to welcome one of our big men here who has been working ceaselessly and tirelessly on our collective objectives and our collective goals. I'd like to invite Mr. Paul Osei Kufuor, who is the Wademos Network Coordinator. He's been at the center of a lot of this. So I guess you'll be the right person to come and then give us a presentation on 1 year of Wademos, what has been the achievements and the progress so far. Ladies and gentlemen, let's put our hands together for Mr. Osei Kufuor.
Bonjour. Good morning, colleagues, friends, network partners, and all participants gathered here. I have the singular honor, but I'm doing this on behalf of my team, very hardworking and dedicated team that is strongly anchoring the Wadimos initiative and concept. So I want to add my voice to also welcome you to the two-day conference, which is framed in such a way that we take stock of democracy in the region, use the reflections to inform our programming for the coming year. On this note, I want to extend a heartfelt appreciation to all of you for your commitment and dedication once again to the Wadimos initiative. I don't want to mention names and leave some out, but you all agree with me that ECOWAS and all the other regional bodies have been very instrumental in collaborating with Wadimos and supporting the initiative. So we want to extend that appreciation to them, and you know my good brother, Mr. Siedu, will pass it on to the commissioner and the other members of the commission. So for my presentation is structured in two ways. The first is to give an update on the programs and activities that we've implemented for the year. And as my executive director, apologies, I should have also recognized his statesman role and his personality that he has put at the center in driving Wadimos at the PMU level and also at the regional level as well. Back to my presentation, as I did mention, that is framed in two parts. And the first part will give an update of Wadimos activities, and the second part will respond to a request that came from my executive director to also highlight the state of play. This is a cliche that I'm also getting used to with respect to democracy in the sub-region. So ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, you recall that somewhere last year, we launched the Wadimos initiative. That was around September 2022, specifically on the International Day of Democracy, if I remember, to provide a platform to enhance the mobilization of CSOs against democracy backsliding in West Africa. So the two-day conference and launch was preceded by a strategy formulation workshop. And at the end of the workshop, and also informed by the political environment at the time, characterized by attack on human rights defenders, clampdown of the civic space, concerns around free and fair elections, rising insecurity, and the resurgence of unconstitutional changes of governments in the sub-region, the network members concluded on 5 priority areas and interventions for the next 2 years. These include support for credible electoral processes and systems, promotion and protection of the civic space, support for human rights defenders and activists at risk, support for political transitions in West Africa, and peace and security. So these were the 5 priority areas and the marching orders that was given to us after the launch last year. In addition to these 5 priority areas, the underlisted complementary and cross-cutting initiatives were developed at the PMU level to help anchor the 5 priority areas. And these are a knowledge hub to support advocacy and policy influencing activities of members at national and regional level, political transition initiatives to enhance regional and national collective response to unconstitutional changes in governments in West Africa. The third one is the Demos Fund to provide timely mobilization of resources and response to democracy-relevant interventions in the sub-region, and the Next Generation initiatives to empower young people and women as the next generation activists, defenders, and leaders of civil society and government. So these were the 4 complementary initiatives that sought to anchor the strategic priority areas. So In terms of how we implement or deploy our interventions, permit me to say something about it because it's a network and there are some guiding values, principles, and philosophy informing how to strengthen coordination mechanisms in the network. So in terms of the approach to implementation, the PMU is guided mainly by the network shared values and commitments of solidarity, collaboration, co-creation, coordination, facilitation role, and complementarity in program design and implementation. WADEMO's interventions are implemented through working groups, convenings, campaigns, solidarity missions, learning and knowledge exchange among network members, and engagements with regional bodies and governments, including institutions at national level. Now I'll go into report on the activities that we implemented for the year within the context or background of the marching orders that was given to us last year, and also within the priority areas and the complementary initiatives. So in terms of the priority areas, elections, I want to set a bit of context around elections because sometimes there are questions around why you seem to also focus extensively on elections as a network. Ladies and gentlemen, although elections do not equate with democracy, the holding of free and fair elections is recognized as a hallmark of accountability and a fundamental component of a functioning democracy. The African Charter on Democracy, Elections and Governance, that is ACDEC, reinforces this link and sets electoral standards for the continent. Moreover, there has been concern that African elections are becoming increasingly contentious and marked by fear. In some cases, elections have been little more than springboards for leaders who, once in office, subvert democratic institutions to consolidate their position. This informed our interventions and support on elections, especially when West Africa was preparing for 3 major elections for the year, that is this current year. So what did we do? 3 pre-election missions were deployed to Nigeria, Sierra Leone, and Liberia in collaboration with WION, that is the West Africa Election Observation Network. The mission sought to promote solidarity and knowledge exchange among countries preparing for election in 2023. Again, it sought to promote interest and awareness among West African citizens on elections happening in the region. To achieve this, a number of roundtable discussions and dialogues, as well as sensitization, were held online with participants from West Africa and beyond. In addition, we held in-person sessions in Sierra Leone and Liberia with the media and CSOs to share our findings from the fact-finding mission and assessments. The pre-election activities in particular engage very important stakeholders and organizations, including the election management bodies in the 3 countries, peace-building institutions, human rights institutions, media, civil society organizations, and local election observation networks, regional bodies, and development partners. Our work on elections contributed in developing policy-relevant reports, briefs, and perspectives on elections in the sub-region. This includes the publication of a report on the Nigerian election, the production of pre-election assessment reports on Liberia, Nigeria, and Sierra Leone. Again, WADEMO's plan to share further insights and perspectives on elections, drawing comparative experiences from Liberia, Sierra Leone, and Nigeria, including the increasing role of the courts in elections in Africa. On political transitions, WADEMO's extended solidarity to countries in Francophone West Africa with a special focus on countries undergoing transition to constitutional order. The network commissioned a study to assess ongoing political transitions in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Guinea. At the time of the study, Niger was stable and had not experienced an overthrow of the government. Following the production of the draft reports produced with the support of some network members, Wademos organized a conference bringing on board ECOWAS and experts on political transitions in Abidjan to discuss the findings of the report and draw relevance for programming and advocacy. Francophone West Africa was of special focus following recent AB data, that's Afrobarometer data, that shows disproportionate levels of decline on key democracy-relevant indicators, norms and values in French-speaking countries, and the resurgence of unconstitutional changes of government. The conference produced an outcome document which, among others, proposed the design and implementation of a coordinated national level strategies for CSOs in transition countries with the objective of creating opportunities for solidarity and experience sharing. Wademos subsequently created a working group on political transitions and facilitated online meetings at national level, leading to the production of a country-level enhanced CSO coordinated program on engagement with the transition processes in their respective countries. A regional consultative and validation meeting was held in Guinea, Conakry, to review the draft national strategies. In attendance was some ministers from the transition government and experts from IFES and OSF on democratic transitions in West Africa. Let me also mention that whilst in Guinea, the delegation paid a courtesy call on the president of the Transitional Council, that is Mr. Dansa Koroma, where he pledged his commitment to the transition process in Guinea. Wademos will continue to work with the members of the working group on political transitions to enhance CSO's engagement at the national level and provide a platform for regular meetings and experience sharing. We will also prioritize the implementation of the full outcome document on the Abidjan conference. And this document is accessible on our social media pages and websites. It provides a lot of reflections on how to counter democracy backsliding in Francophone West Africa and also work around countries undergoing political transitions. Now I talk about our next generation initiative, that is the complementary initiatives. Listening to the conversation yesterday, the point was made about how to secure democracy in the next generational span, including the role of young people. And this point was emphasized strongly by Dr. Kwete when he was highlighting the drivers of democracy decline in Africa or globally. So as part of our Next Gen initiative, we launched it in August 2023 to empower young people as next generation activists, defenders, and leaders of civil society and government. We received a total application from 168 enthusiastic young people. And following a thorough review, 48 applicants were shortlisted for interviews. After a rigorous process, 15 outstanding candidates were chosen, comprising 7 males, 8 females, and 1 person with disability, representing a diverse group from 13 countries. I think there were 2 countries that we struggled to get nomination or applications from. After re-advertising and also liaising with our networks in those countries, we were still unsuccessful. We wanted to ensure diversity in the program so that it cuts across all countries, especially countries with high levels of vulnerability and that are facing fragility issues as well. The selected candidates are from West African countries including Ghana, Nigeria, Niger, Togo, Burkina Faso, Ivory Coast, Gambia, Benin, Senegal, Sierra Leone, Guinea, and Guinea-Bissau. The Next Gen Initiative virtual class commenced on November 8th, 2023, featuring intensive lectures designed to equip participants with skills and knowledge around a broad spectrum of topics on democracy, human rights, rule of law, peace and security, regional normative frameworks and instruments, leadership, advocacy strategies, and networking, among others. We intend to display or make these presentations accessible on our online platform so that participants can also get access to it and use it for your programming or for your own learning as well. Next steps for the next gen. The cohorts will embark on a mentoring program with their mentors in their respective countries, and then they will return to Ghana for a culmination meeting to reflect on the learnings and discuss interventions and initiatives they intend to champion in their individual countries. Wademos will continue to integrate the group and sustain the next generation fellows as an initiative under the network. Some of them were able, I must mention that, some of them joined us online yesterday to participate in the conference. And some of these young fellows have all started championing programs and initiatives already at their country level, and they are giving us updates. Also, the idea of an annual convening with the next generation fellows, either online or in person, will be explored in the coming year. Demos Fund, another complementary initiative. As part of Wademo's key initiatives for the year 2023, the Democracy Opportunity Support Fund was launched in June. The Demos Fund is one of the strategic anchors driving the Wademo's priority areas and strategies to counter democracy backsliding in West Africa. The fund provides timely resources to civil society to mobilize in solidarity to respond to democracy openings, opportunities, and threats at regional and national level. The fund has two windows: competitive and an unsolicited or co-created intervention between network members and the PMU. All grants are approved by the Fund Management Committee, and the Fund Management Committee is a subcommittee of the Steering Committee. 31 applications were received from different countries across the West African region for the competitive window, mainly from Anglophone and Francophone states. Among the 31, 12 were shortlisted and recommended to the Evaluation Committee, which I mentioned is the subcommittee of the Steering Committee. All 7 projects have so far been funded, comprising GenSed, which is working on strengthening protection for human rights defenders. They are conducting a baseline to inform the next steps of action that Wademos can co-create with GenSed to support human rights defenders in West Africa. And then CDG Liberia also received funding to embark on legal education for political parties and independent candidates to mitigate electoral violence and also improve the understanding on election dispute adjudication ahead of the 2023 elections in Liberia. Also, we supported WAXI during the West Africa Civil Society Week in Lagos. We've also provided grants to Women in Politics Forum in Nigeria, and the focus is reversing the shrinking gender political space in Nigeria, aimed at promoting inclusion, learning from experiences that we had from Sierra Leone that has introduced the gender empowerment, focusing on women inclusion in politics. And then there were other 2 studies, because Wademos believes strongly in investing in evidence and knowledge production to drive programming and advocacy. So the conversation around disinformation and misinformation, there are steps by communication regulators to combat disinformation for a safe and transparent information ecosystem for democracy in West Africa. So Wademos is investing in this process, and we've supported a consultant to give us feedback so that we can share the experience or learning with network members and possibly co-create response to disinformation and misinformation, because it's likely that there's a possibility of some regulations coming within that space. And it's important as civil society, either we lead the agenda or influence the process, because we need a lot of information. We need to talk. We have to be active and preemptive of any possible draconian or repressive laws that can regulate or restrict our ability and capacity to be relevant within the civic space. Also, there have been a lot of conversation around how to strengthen democratic governance, especially in the period between elections, so that we do not become too obsessed and focused with elections, but governance in our respective countries is also of equal importance. Here, when we talk about governance, we're talking about corruption issues, economic performance issues. A lot of the Afrobarometer indicators give some pointers to governance in our respective countries. So there is a consultant who is trying to work with us, basically to do a pilot project termed as the West Africa Governance Risk Assessment. So identifying and addressing signs of retrogressions in governance to inform advocacy campaign and early warnings about democracy and development in West Africa. So we will keep you informed and engaged in this process. It doesn't appear we have strong Francophone presence in the beneficiaries for the Demos Fund. But as I did mention, we have a program with our network partners in countries undergoing political transitions, and we are almost at the tail end of extending funding to all network members in transition countries to support their mobilization and implement the national strategies that have been developed. Then Democratives, which is also another complementary initiative. The name itself self-explains it. So we are combining creatives to the democracy conversation or democracy backsliding conversation. And we held an online session with a cross-section of Democratives, that is around July this year, to deliberate on opportunities for Democratives in promoting democratic values in the sub-region. We plan to consolidate the progress we've made with the Democratives, so we are considering an in-person convening in Senegal in partnership with Africtivists to advance the initial or inception conversations that we had. We intend to do a similar exercise with social movements, because yesterday I picked strongly that you need to connect the traditional CSOs with a lot of social movements as well. So we intend to also see how we can do a mapping of social movements that are springing up in the sub-region and how Wadimos can provide that facilitating and enabling opportunities for them to work together and cross-fertilize experience and approaches. So if you know some of the social movements, our Knowledge Hub or the PMU will be reaching out to you so that you help us map all of them and find a way of creating solidarity, which is a core value for Wadimos. Then, on term limit campaign, we received funding from OSF Africa to amplify the term limit campaign in West Africa. Here, there's a Francophone advocacy group who have reached out to Wadimos to facilitate the participation of an Anglophone group, and as an immediate activity, launch the term limit campaign in Abuja next week, ahead of the ECOWAS Heads of Summit meeting, which is taking place next month, December 10th. The meeting will also decide on other activities to embark on as part of the campaign to push the regional bodies and governments to adopt term limits in the normative instruments and constitutions in West Africa. Currently, we have some countries like Togo, Cote d'Ivoire, and Gambia who have term limits modified or eliminated, or there's not been any limit yet by any presidents. It's also important, as we are starting the campaign on term limits, we target countries in political transitions who are drafting new constitutions into the conversation. And I believe some of you might have been contacted by my colleague Marie regarding this meeting that we plan to have Abuja next week. Other complementary initiatives include the Eye on West Africa and other publications. 27 knowledge pieces of the Eye on West Africa have been developed and disseminated within the year 2023. Some of our target audience includes His Excellency Ambassador Bankole Adeoye of AU, who joined us yesterday, and I think he did acknowledge receiving the Eye on West Africa publications on regular basis. Dr. Ambassador Fatahu Musa and other ECOWAS officials, network members, international partners, and other stakeholders. We have a draft alert that maps trends and observations in countries undergoing political transitions and will be published in the first quarter to draw attention and enhance solidarity or mobilization, as well as attention within the governance space. We intend to publish the study on the transition processes that we conducted in Mali, Burkina Faso, and Guinea in the next quarter. We also plan to release a quarterly regional democracy watch publication in the coming year to enhance our monitoring of the West Africa political environment. The Knowledge Hub will reach out to you to provide regular updates from your individual countries. And as usual, with your commitment to Wademos, you know you succumb to this request politely and respectfully. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let me talk about the project structures and management as a network, how we have performed in terms of our governance structures. 3 meetings of the steering committee were held for the 2023 operational year. The 3rd meeting was held 2 days earlier, and out of the 11 members of the steering committee, we had 10 in attendance. So that is significance and demonstrates the continued loyalty and commitment to the network. Network membership, there are currently 38 network members. About 27 additional organizations have applied to join the network. And the PMU drafted guidelines for evaluating applications. We have submitted it to the steering committee. The meeting held 2 days back was the 2nd time that we submitted that guidelines to them. And they are very refreshing, and compelling proposals and suggestions that we need to consider how we want to expand and grow the network so that we do not close doors to civil society, but how do you also sustain, coordinate, and deepen engagement if you want to expand? Because the relevance of a network is through the engagements and opportunities and incentives that you put on the table. We also have an advisory council. That is an area that we did not perform creditably well because we are still new and rethinking or reimagining how we want to conceptualize the advisory council. So a term of reference was put together for the council, and we are working towards its inauguration. Currently, there are 4 members who have agreed to serve on the council, including a former president. And next year, the first quarter, one of our preoccupations will be how to finalize the conceptualization of the advisory council. Certainly, we are looking at a council of eminent personalities who can provide support or interventions, including mediations on behalf of civil society, and complement initiatives ECOWAS and other regional bodies are implementing. So if you have nominations and recommendations, kindly also share with us. We have 2 functional groups. We call it working groups on elections and political transitions. We did not want to start the network immediately by forming these groups. So we wanted the programs to drive the formation of the groups so that, as I didn't indicate, there will be work for the groups to do. There will be engagements for the group as well. So currently, the initiatives that have received a lot of attention and focus, that is election and political transition, do have functional working groups at the moment. And because you also want to complement, solidarize our values and not to compete, we always want to leverage on existing institution actors and civil society players in every space that we want to. So for example, if you want to do something around media, And I think Abigail raised a very important point about how to incentivize the media in the conversation on democracy backsliding. So we'll go back to Media Foundation for West Africa and see how we can co-create this kind of initiative. The same applies to peace and security. You have expertise, skills, and knowledge already existing. So Wadimos seems to come in to create an added value and not to compete in the space, so that there will be mutual support and benefit to the interests of democracy. And let me also mention that at the PMU level, we have recruited a bilingual project assistant, and a number of interns and national service persons are at post. We want to have more interns from Francophone countries, and because of the power of technology, these interns can still operate online or remotely. So please, if you have recommendations, it's also part of the process of nurturing young people into the democratic space. So please send recommendations to us so that we can support them. On sustainability, I've mentioned that we receive funding from OSF. So currently we're trying to diversify the funding portfolio and not to rely exclusively on CEDA. We appreciate and commend the support for the first 3 years, which is ending next year. But the PMU is making a lot of efforts to diversify and expand the funding base of the network. So we were able to receive funding for our work on term limits and to counter human rights violation and restriction of freedoms in Senegal. So our work around term limits, which I mentioned earlier that some of you have been contacted, will take place this year and will continue for the next 2 years. Then we have another project that seeks to enhance civil society capacity, also focus on democratic transitions, but a much more emphasis on how the current geopolitical environment is playing on democracy and governance in the region, with a special focus on malign influence of Russia and other hard power approaches that are being deployed in the region. And this is funded by NED, the National Endowment for Democracy. It involves a lot of knowledge production that will be used to engage our members to build capacity and identify opportunities for us to make our voices heard in the current geopolitical dynamics in the region. Then on partnerships and networking, it's important as Wadimos, we pay attention and interest in activities of network members. And also, the regional bodies are one of our key target institutions. So if you are not having opportunity to work closely with regional bodies, then it means we are not really achieving very well on our indicators for assessing our relevance. And as I did mention, ECOWAS has been gracious enough to align with the values of the network and also in its broader conceptualization of working closely with CSOs in the sub-region. So we received an invitation from ECOWAS to be part of the election observation mission in Liberia for the October election and the presidential runoff, which I was there with Mr. Siedu. And then I also represented CSOs in West Africa at the African Union Peace and Security Engagement with CSOs. And I represented the West Africa sub-region out of the other 5 regional economic communities to share insights on peace and security situation and the political environment in West Africa. The project director, Professor Prempe, also participated in a number of regional meetings. One of it is a regional workshop on unconstitutional changes of government held in the Gambia early this year. Wadimos also participated in network member activities, that of the Civil Society Week organized by WAXI, and the WAMECA, that is the West Africa Media Excellence and Conference, organized by the Media Foundation for West Africa. Prof. Prempe also participated in a recently held ECOWAS Parliament regional convening in Winneba, And then just last week, or so, that's Thursday or Friday, Wadimos participated in a meeting with the delegation from the National Transition Council who came from Guinea on a tour to study Ghana's electoral processes. And myself and Prof. Prempe were part of the meeting. So then I go to the final section of my report, which is what are we learning as a network? We were formed having in mind a theory of change that civil society organizations, we work in silos, and if we can work collaboratively and close the bridges and have some common agenda to rally around, we should be able to combat the challenge of democracy backsliding in West Africa. And then there were some assumptions that the space is not totally constrained. Some countries are facing challenges, but there are still open spaces for civil society to engage. ECOWAS is also opening up to civil society engagement. So there were a lot of assumptions that drive the work of Wadimos. But it's important to also reflect how this has played out, as I was directed to do under the state of play. So for our learning, on the positive side, the withdrawal of term limit by Macky Sall in Senegal was a positive development. Lessons must be drawn on how the resistant capacity of the people of Senegal, especially young people and social movements, contributed in providing deterrence to Macky Sall, so that these learnings can be extended to other countries in the sub-region. We also, as earlier mentioned, we also witnessed the successful election held in Liberia, with the incumbent conceding defeat. Then on the another side, another positive side is that one of the transition countries, that is Mali, excuse me, water. Then another positive side had to do with the Malian transition process being able to have a draft constitution in place through a referendum. Though there are challenges, but we all believe that constitutions are living documents which can be reformed and improved at any point in time. So it gives a bit of optimism to the political transitions processes in West Africa. Then, on a much more substantive point, which reinforces our assumptions on democracy, is that democracy still continues to remain the preferred form of governance for citizens in the sub-region. So we still have something to fall on to make a case. But the most important thing is, how do you make a business case to build resilience around democracy, considering the negative messaging and rhetorics around democracy and how disillusioned citizens are at the moment. Then challenges and threats in terms of the learning and the state of play. So under countries undergoing political transitions, what we have noticed is a growing alliance among countries under unconstitutional changes of government, leading to the signing of the Mutual Defense Pact in Bamako by coup-affected countries to strengthen military cooperation and solidarity. This is a worrying development. Then the transition process is stalled somehow in Guinea, Burkina Faso, and then there is no transition in Niger at the moment, despite progress in Mali. These countries are gradually shifting the focus and priorities from transition to governance, which is not a core mandate for any transition government. The mandate that we believe is that you focus on the transition process and move out or move the country into a constitutional order. The junta is hanging on and exploiting the negative messaging and rhetoric against democracy to perpetuate their stay. For Guinea and Burkina Faso, We see that the priority is not on the transition, as I did mention. There was an interesting development when we went to Guinea, and the representative of the transition government indicated that they are looking for funds, and ECOWAS has indicated that they will finance the budget for the transition. So this is also quite alarming, and how do we surmount this problem? Similarly, Burkina Faso transition government is using the deteriorating security situation as pretext to hang on to power. Then a transition timeline and framework, as you all know, is yet to be agreed upon between ECOWAS and the transition government in Niger. We also want to draw attention on the current humanitarian crisis in the Sahel, allegedly due to ECOWAS sanctions. And how do we address this issue is also of significance. Another learning is where Afrobarometer data shows decline in rejection of the military over time. And how do you balance that when you want to carry your citizens around, but they seem to contradict in terms of values and the support that they have for democracy. Though democracy is still the preferred one, Afrobarometer data shows that rejection of the military continues to be on a decline, and that more people are supporting military governments as a form of governance. Then on security, what we are learning from the region is the withdrawal of MINUSMA and concerns around the declining resistant capacity of regional bodies to provide the necessary deterrence against unconstitutional changes of government and security in the Sahel. I think Mr. Siedu explained yesterday some initiatives ECOWAS took, which was truncated due to the situation in Niger. And then Dr. Akwede made this point strongly. How do we enhance the resistant capacity of our regional bodies so that they serve as a deterrent? Then we also need to think towards reimagining CSOs and empowering social movements in approaches to combating security threats in the region. Then democracy and election. A very important point I want to refer back again is how do we secure democracy in the next generational span, focusing on the role of young people. This point was made again at the panel session, I think the second one. Then election dispute mediation and the role of the courts, especially as the courts are facing trust deficits. And yesterday, the Afrobarometer data shows that trust in institutions continue to decline. And let me refresh your memories about an incident that happened in Ghana yesterday, where the Office of the Special Prosecutor of Ghana yesterday held a press conference to express his disillusion and criticism of the courts in what he described as a trend of, and I quote, a trend of regressive and dismissive judicial decisions in respect of cases involving the OSP with troubling consequences. So the OSP is expressing frustrations with the courts. And already there's a lot of popular sentiments against our courts. And this seems to go a long way to either give credence to the trust issues or the trust deficits that we have with our courts. So if we are not finding ways to mediate election peacefully, and in Sierra Leone, they didn't go to court. So election mediation is a very important topic. And during our fact-finding missions, what we also noticed was that the capacity of the local mediation actors continued to dwindle because of the excessive partisan political polarization. So there is no trust for anybody who wants to stand up to mediate when there is an election dispute. So this is a red flag and a warning sign. We also witnessed threats to election observers, and we need to reflect on the protection and the guarantees provided by the regional normative instruments, country constitutions, because this is a trend that is evolving. We experience it in the, excuse me. We experience it in Sierra Leone, In the last election, where our keynote speaker and some members of the national election watch team had to be migrated to Ghana for safekeeping, if you allow me in quotes. And we've seen it in Liberia, ahead of the elections. My brother, Oscar, received a lot of threats. I think I did forward it to you, Mr. Seed, if I remember, regarding trying to label him and undermining his integrity. So, election observers, which is critical to elections, especially in the declining role of the courts, are facing a lot of attacks and intimidations. I want to conclude by thanking all of you and expressing the network's appreciation to you all. I don't like mentioning names, but I have to also recognize the significant contributions that we received from our two co-chairs, who extended a lot of time and attention, including serving on the steering committee for the evaluation committee for the Demos Fund. And even beyond that, facilitating our entry to Guinea and engagement with relevant actors in the case of Dr. Aliu Bari. So we want to commend him for all the support that they've given to us. I hope everybody knows our two co-chairs. Maybe if you don't know them, can you politely, respectfully be on your feet so you are recognized once again? Can we give them a hand of applause? So Mr. Damien is representing Idayat Hassan, CDD West Africa, and Dr. Aliu Bari is from StartView International. So for next year, we will continue to do work around elections. Based on the context that I did indicate that elections still remain critical, we are still thinking of a better approach to enhance our election work. We still believe that the pre-election assessment is very important, provides a lot of learning and insights. Senegal and Ghana are on the radar, so we'll be talking to our partners very soon. And then my boss, Prof. Prempe, also extended an invitation to the Guinea delegation to participate as observers in the elections, presidential and parliamentary elections, to be held in Ghana next year. Then our work on political transitions will also continue, support the transition process, including the constitutional development process and electoral frameworks. Term limit campaign, assessment of the ECOWAS protocol, popularizing the normative instruments will also continue to be something of interest. And then we will consolidate our work based on the findings from the study that GenSed is doing on human rights defenders and explore entry points for us. Our next gen will also continue. And then most importantly, we will strengthen our national and regional level solidarity. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Paul Osei-Kuffour. He's spent some time, 1 year, distilling it all into a few minutes of speech. Please, let's recognize Mr. Osei-Kuffour. So Prof is here as usual. The professors are very critical. He said no questions. You know, I wasn't surprised to hear that. So let's get it. Are there any comments or questions for Mr. Osei-Kuffour? Or I don't know, some feedback. Yes, Prof.
Yeah. So, that the Demos Fund has 2 windows, but I think you told us about only one.
Okay.
Maybe I missed it, but you didn't mention the second window and whether or not that window was activated during this year or whether it remains to be activated.
Okay. So I think, Paul, you're okay answering from there.
And then maybe to add to that too, maybe you should say a little bit more about why there was we had very low participation in the Demos Fund from the Francophone countries. I didn't quite understand that bit of it.
All right. Thank you very much, Prof. All right, Mr. Osekufo, please take it up.
Hello, thank you. I mixed something in my report, but before I go on to respond, I think I also want to emphasize and commend my PMU, as I did in the beginning, that they've been a very strong anchor in driving most of the initiatives and the strategic priorities that we design. Back to Prof's question. Oh, the demos fund, there were two windows. The second window was also activated. So institutions like Media Foundation for West Africa and WAXI were not part of the competitive grant process, but they engaged us, and then we co-created and extended support to them. So these two organizations receive funding under the unsolicited or the non-competitive window. I think you also asked of the low participation of Francophone countries. In my presentation, I did emphasize that we received a couple of applications from countries undergoing political transitions, but we wanted to implement in a way that will bring a lot of value and also ensure sustainability and coordination in their interventions. So that's why we brought them together to share experiences and review their proposals, because when they even submitted the proposals, there were a lot of developments that are taking place that need to be considered in redesigning the interventions. So we have finalized the validation process. We have the strategies also finalized. So we're going to extend funds to coalitions in Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso, focusing on the transition process. And this will be financed under the Demos Fund. Is there any question I also missed? Or?
That's okay. Okay. So, is there any other window that's going to be opening or coming up?
So, the plan is to reflect on the first year, and we are here to receive feedbacks. The challenge is that the open window process is very elaborate and very demanding and time consuming, because you basically also become a fund management unit that needs to go through all the rigors of evaluating proposals and the time and attention that you need to pay. So we want to receive feedback from network members, but we're also thinking, why don't we make it unsolicited and restricted only to network members? Because the core mandate of the fund is to drive our priority areas and then also support in enhancing timely response to openings and opportunities for us to counter democracy backsliding in the region. So we are looking at having a review, and at our PMU retreat session, in addition to the feedback that we gather from here, we will take a final decision. So please, if there are suggestions, we can welcome it as well. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, sir. Yes, Mr. Abraham or Madam. Okay, Madam, please go ahead.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. I just want to appreciate Wademos. It's barely just a year, that it started, and they've been able to do so much. I can say we have been able to do so much because we are all part of the Wademos team. So I want to encourage them to remain focused and collaborate more. And especially, I'll look forward to the organization, being a strong voice within the ECOWAS region. Yeah, because we need to, put a kind of check and balance on our government, our governments actually. So what else can do that? And I see they have started very well. And I hope that come next year, and then for us in Nigeria, 2027, when we'll be having another elections, we will not want to have a repeat of what happened the last election. And I think Wadamos is in a position, to speak up from this time to 2027. So for us, we also would like Wadamos to work more with political parties, especially in Nigeria, also to see that there's internal democracy. Some of these problems starts from, nomination process. So if we overlook nomination process and think that we can get the main elections right, it will never be right. So I think we can extend our work towards that direction. Start early with the nomination process, and then we can think of having a better elections. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think that's very well taken. When Mr. Sekuvo was talking, I realized there was a lot that they had done, and that was going on over the years. So it's good to get this kind of encouragements. He mentioned a lot of things that have been going on just for a year. So thank you. And I just wanted to say something about working with political parties, because it's something that ties into what came up yesterday as well, one of the major themes. And I've actually been wondering about it. I'm more communication, but when I think about governance, I think about the internal primary processes, and I realize that a lot of our governance experts focus on elections and other governance institutions, but the primary process is something that really needs some attention, the internal dynamics within the party and making them democratized. So it's good you've mentioned that. Thank you. So, yeah, please go ahead, Mr. Abraham, and then we can have... Okay, since you are sitting closer, I guess you can take it up.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Kufo, for the updates, and thank you so much for the great work that you people are doing at the Secretariat. My question is basically on the Next Gen initiative. I didn't hear anything about the timeline for their training, and also what is the integration process into the network, and also what is the plan to also and link them with the current members of WADEMOS and the Next Gen initiative in those countries. Is there going to be a synchronization phase where you introduce the Next Gen to the existing members in different countries? Thank you.
All right, thank you. So we'll take the next one, and then he can,
Sorry, mine is not a question. Just to take it from where Madam stops. I think the coordinator, the executive director, and every member deserve more applause.
Please, let's give ourselves... And it's a short time, 1 year.
Yeah, within a short time, one single year, for a network to have achieved so much, I think is commendable. Right. And mine just to tell them to do more, knowing fully well that the CSOs, NGOs, they are never satisfied, but truly I think they've done one of the very best. And the second point I want to raise, and the reference point just walked in, is about the use of phones. I think for the first time I'm hearing so much usage in the past very many years. Anglophone, Francophone, Lusophone. I think we should start emphasizing them. Who will ever believe that Britain, colonized America? You will never hear it. I never had such narratives back in the East, the East Africa. So I think we should do some conscious cultural reorientation and start seeing ourselves as West Africa. If you don't have any name, if I cannot call you Twa, Yoruba, use all those ethnic groups. Mention the name. People from Cape Verde and the Nigerian, not been able to get any contact in Mali, Burkina Faso. I think it's better than be saying Francophone, Anglophone, and all those phones. So I think we should truly de-emphasize that. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. So, Prof, very quickly.
To come back.
No, that's okay.
I wanted to amplify, for lack of a better word, amplify a point that Paul made about the constitution of the advisory council. So in the structure, the governance structure of Wadimos as is in our bylaws, we have an advisory council, then a steering committee, which is like the board, and then the PMU, which is like the implementing bureaucracy, or like the ECOWAS Commission. Right? So we haven't constituted the advisory council. The advisory council, the idea is to find people in the region who could use their good offices, right? Basically, people with substantial reputation who can use their good offices on behalf of Wadimos, so that some of the interventions that are pretty high level, sometimes high risk, we could count on those resources in the region to do that intervention for us. We've managed to get commitment from the former president of Cape Verde. He's one of our members, or at least one who has given early commitment to join. Ibn Chambers is available to join. We're trying to get from across the region personalities of that kind. Why diversity? We have tried to reach, what's her name?
Johnson Sirleaf?
No. From internationally famous musician from Benin, what's her name? Angelique. So we're trying to find, people who are openly supportive of democracy, have substantial regional and international reach, who can, help the cause. So please help us to do this kind of recruitment. It's not, we know, if we limit ourselves to the people we know, it will be just a bunch of friends on the committee, on the council. So we want to avoid that. And we want to have the necessary country balance, phonic balance, gender balance. We want 2 co-chairs, one of whom, has to be male, or one of whom has to be female. So we are looking to constitute something of that kind, and it's a top priority. We really have to have an advisory council of men and women of high reputation who could use their good offices, who are not members of the council. These are individuals outside. So please help us with some names. It's not easy in the region. It's very polarized politics. So finding people who are politically somewhat neutral or balanced is not a very easy thing to do, but we have to strive to get those people on the council. And I would like to Mr. Kufuor again to supply us with a little bit of maybe financial information. How much was the Demos fund? How much have we disbursed? What's the budget for it? And how much did we disburse this year? Unfortunately, maybe I should know all these details, but for the benefit of members, if you could tell us how much we spent on the Demos fund to support various activities of the members, and maybe we are going to give an annual report. Are we going to prepare an annual report, audited report, and send it out? Those kinds of things.
Right. Thank you very much, Prof. So I think Prof's point is very clearly made. And, we always complain about westernization. When there are interventions, we always, in the past, would get people from the West, coming to intervene. And it's about time that we have these homegrown people of stature who can do that. I remember when I was doing my PhD studies in the US, some of the Kenyan students that I met spoke very highly of our former president, Kufuor, and the role that he played in 2007 during the Kenyan conflict. So I do think this is a point that has to be taken up, and if we can get a lot of such. We all have networks and connections one way or the other. I know there are big men and women sitting here. Some of you have the president and vice presidents on speed dial on your phones. So if you can do that, it will be very, very helpful. So that was Prof's first point. And the second one, that one, I can't say anything about it. So Mr. Paul, please take it up. Yes.
Thank you, Doc.
I think my colleagues are here. So, MJ, Jonah, Emmanuel, Grace, and the team. If you have anything to add, please feel free to come in. So, my brother's point about how to integrate and synchronize the next gen graduates into the program, Wademos program, and then also introducing them to network members in the 15 countries or the 13 countries that they came from. It's a very good point. So currently, as part of sustainability, and as I did mention in my report, that we want to institutionalize our relationship with the next gen fellows. So we are creating it as an initiative. It's an initiative, but we're going to integrate it in our programming for next year so that we don't truncate the investments that we have made in them. So one area that we want to explore is to have a youth version of what we are doing now. So if you're able to graduate a lot of next gen fellows, hopefully next year if you do the same thing and we can add the numbers to what we have done for this year, we can plan an annual session that will be a prelude to this current one with young people. And I think we have the resource in the room to have that conversation and begin to catch them for the current and the next generation as well. And then, on de-emphasizing the use of the phones, I think I couldn't agree with you more, and also thanks for the compliments, Mr. Femi. Then on the demos fund, so we made sure that the PMU will not be the only anchor in determining the use of funds. So what we did was to make sure that we seed a sizable amount of the fund to the demos fund, because that provides the entry point for network members. And in so doing, we seeded an amount of 300,000 USD, which is, I think, almost 30% or more of the funds for Wademos for this year. Currently, we have utilized 100,000 USD, and we are yet to fund initiatives from the transition countries, which will also take quite a huge chunk of the remaining funds. One request that I want to put forth to grantees is that we don't have the full complement of the team that will be deployed on full-time basis for the management of the grants. So we will want to request your support to work closely with us in driving the initiatives that you submitted to us. In so doing, I think that is the only way that we can make a very good case for the sustainability of the next gen and help us to drive the initiatives together and for our mutual benefit and also for the support of democracy. So we are counting very much on you to make a very good case and sustain it. The first annual audit report is ready, and my finance officer colleague from the finance department, I will encourage him to disseminate copies of the report to all network members. Yesterday too, we presented the financial position and the financial, not yesterday, sorry, 2 days before today, when we met with the steering committee. We gave a very in-depth and comprehensive report on the finances to the steering committee. We will make that report available in addition to the audit report and send it to you individually in your emails so that we are also very much informed of the financial position of the network. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Any follow-ups? I don't know if that's okay. Yeah, it's satisfactory. Okay, so please, we come to this side of it. I'm following the lead of Madam from yesterday. So we are coming to this side. Yes, Monsieur.
Ok, bonjour à tout le monde. Moi, je suis Balde Alassane Kona, je suis de CPJ Guinée. Alors, j'ai une première question. La question, c'est justement par rapport aux acteurs créatifs, parce qu'ils ont annoncé différentes phases. Il y a une première phase qui porte sur la formation, une seconde phase qui porte sur le mentorat, et une troisième phase qui va porter justement sur...
And the third one is linked to the implementation of projects. So the mentoring phase, how long is it going to last? That is the first question. We know that there is the need for training, but in order to ensure effectiveness, we must allocate enough time to mentoring. The second question has to do with the Demos Fund. The closure date for that fund. I have the feeling that Wademos are trying to support organizations within countries that are ongoing transition periods. But there are other cases. When we take the case of Guinea, we know that there are political parties in those countries, and there are some political parties that support dictatorship. So there is the need to conduct some sensitization work in those countries. So it is good to support the transition in those countries, but we also need to sensitize the activists and the political parties. That is a very key intervention that we must think of. I thank you.
I would like to congratulate Paul and his team for a very nice job done only in 1 year by the consultants, especially the prospects that we have for this year. I would like to emphasize what Guinea has just said. Guinea Conakry has said. That is the focus on situation of countries in transition. In my view, they need a special particular attention to prevent this situation, and they need to be sustained. We have to use a lot of resources, especially financial resources, so that they do not like resources in the future. We need to give them resources with very good conditions. Coming from Wademos, based on the principles and values of the democracy, we have to invest in a situation where we can get good benefits. To be able to remedy the situation. So we have to invest to prevent. We have to invest in education and the area of democracy. We have to involve civil societies and actors, so that we'll be able to guarantee a very good future for our people, and our people should be well prepared and educated to be able to face a new constitutional order, so that the democracy and its values will be adhered to. So we don't have to spend too much resources, but the resources must be channeled to specific areas like values of democracy for the future of our people. Thank you.
Thank you. I would like to go in the same direction. I would like to present the case of my country, which is Senegal. In the report, I heard Senegal, the presenter spoke about Senegal, and it is true that the president announced that he will not be running for the next elections. But you know, in Senegal, we are just about 2 months away from the elections, and today we don't know who will be the candidates. You know, we know that Wademos has a lot of experience, so it will be a good thing that we send a team to Senegal, that Wademos sent a team to Senegal in order to show solidarity to the civil society organizations, the activists, and the population, hoping that the electoral process will have a good end. So that is what I would like to add to what has been said. I thank you.
I just learned the opposition leader is in jail. My good friend told me this morning. So I'm sure you will get into some of these issues more in the afternoon. But thanks for all the interventions as well. We would move on. We'll move on. Thank you very much for the feedback and to Mr. Ose Kufuor. Now we'll have a panel for today. Our panel today will be focusing on entry points for CSOs and WADEMOS in countering threats to democratic backsliding in West Africa in 2024. And we all agree that this is a very, very important issue to address, following up on some of yesterday's conversations and even this morning. To help us do this panel or to conduct this panel, we have Bernadette French, Program Coordinator, Campaign for Good Governance in Sierra Leone. I would like to invite our moderator onto the stage if Bernadette is here to take up her seat. And as she does that, let's give her a round of applause. She'll be moderating the discussion with the expert panel. We have about 4 members on the panel who would be joining here to have the discussion today. Benedict, take it over from here.
Thank you very much, Doc, and good morning, everyone. The whole of yesterday, we have been lamenting, expressing our frustrations around the state of affairs, the current state of affairs, as far as democratic consolidation is in the sub-region. But one thing is clear, that in as much as we express our frustrations, we also have been, looking forward in terms of what we can do differently to ensure that we resist, we confront, and we deal with democratic reversals, the current democratic reversals we see. The good news is that all is not lost. There's still hope for the future. The reason it is so painful, when I remember when we were coming into Accra, I was saying to myself, I wish we had been called for a convening that says CSO gathering to discuss and upscale government's effort towards and add value and enrich political, economics, and socio-cultural growth in the sub-region. How celebrating that would have been. But it is so painful that for the last decade or so, all we have been doing is we have been so stuck in the challenges of deepening democracy in the sub-region. The reason it is so painful, I always say, even as we do our work, at Campaign for Good Governance, it is because you would all agree with me that in almost 90% of our countries, of the countries in West Africa, democracy was never handed over to us on a silver plate. The fathers of democracy earned it. We earned it, in most cases, through sweat, tears, and blood. In Sierra Leone, for example, we went through 11 years of bloody conflict to get us where we are. Lives were lost. And it appears to me that all the gains that we have made in the last 20 years is just falling apart in our very... So it is time, so I see this convening, the energy we have put in these 2 days, as a way of introspecting, reflecting, and deep diving into what we can do differently. How creative. It is time for us to go deep into our creative, activating our creative mode to see. And you would all also agree with me that we've been talking about the need for citizens to rise up to the occasion, to take their place in terms of ensuring that those that they elect do not become their masters, but that those that we elect as citizens recognize that we had put our faith in them to help us, support us, hold our hand through the journey of change. And to do that, we cannot do that without the role of civil society. And that role, it is that role, that collective effort that we are here to think through of how can we lead, how can we champion as CSO that drive to ensure that we stamp out any efforts to regress all the investments that have been made in deepening and consolidating democracy in West Africa. And so, for that, to deliberate more intensely into that, I would like to now invite our panelist, Mr. Ebenezer Asiedu, who's the head of democracy and governance at ECOWAS. Mr. Asiedu, you're invited to the podium. Can we? Also, Mr. Sheikh Fall, President Afri Viste. You're invited. Can we give him a round of applause, please? Mutaru Mumuni Mukhtar, Executive Director of the West Africa Center for Counter-Extremism, NAC. Can we give him a round of applause? You're welcome to the podium. and Madame Ebere Ifendu, the President of the Women in Politics Forum. Thank you very much. I think we have now reached the point where we're now going to actually deep dive and hit the nail on the head. And part of what we were discussing yesterday was the fact that, there are two terminologies I always like to quote. One is what the Bible says, that you can only remove the log from somebody else's eyes when you have removed the log in your own. And also that one which says, he who calls for equity must also come with clean hands. And yesterday, whilst we were having the conversation, a lot of discussion was made around the need for civil society to reflect, to sweep the house, to first of all reflect on how we can put ourselves together, because that's the only way we can think through properly, solidarize, build again the movement that we once knew, to be able to address and confront the reversals that we see. And so I want to start with you, Mr. Ebenezer. Yesterday, you gave us a lot of insights into how ECOWAS works. And we all know that, there's this misconception around, the technical wing of ECOWAS and the extent to which they can go in terms of making decisions, and the all-powerful political wing, which is the heads of states. So, and I know for the longest time, ECOWAS has been working hand in hand. The Commission has worked with civil society. What do you think can be the entry point, the re-entrance, because we had already been, the re-entrance in terms of how can we make those changes, taking into consideration also the fact that Professor Prempren was talking about how we can reimagine, the way ECOWAS works in terms of the structure. How do you think CSOs can influence such a reform, such a change, to ensure that we get, value for setting up that body, so that ECOWAS can really achieve its objectives?
Yeah, thank you very much, my dear sister. I would start by saying, obviously, congratulating Wademos for 1 year. And we all heard what Paul presented. That's within that year, the amount of successes or achievements that the organization has chalked. Actually, on Tuesday, I think I was talking to somebody, and I told a person that, I've been invited for this particular event, and it's just a 1 year. And the person said, is Wademos only a year? I thought they've been there for quite a while. And she was saying that because of what she had seen Wademos doing over these few months that she thought had existed longer than that. So it's kudos to the network and for the good things that you've been doing. Just to start from there to say that the existence of Wademos has already, in a way, created that kind of an entry into ECOWAS. Why? Because right from the beginning, Wademos tried to involve ECOWAS, and we also have welcomed that kind of involvement. And the reason why we've also always made ourselves available to accompany whatever the network has been doing. From the start, I would say that just the mere fact that the knowledge products that Wademos has been producing, the briefs, policy briefs and all that, somehow some of the elements that we have actually generated have also, in a way, have been reflected in some of our reports that we prepare for the attention of member states. So that in itself, I would say it's an entry point that they get reflected, and even at the highest level when we are also putting together our reports, because you share with us. But most importantly, I've had some conversations with Wademos, particularly Paul and Dr. Sante, some time ago this year when we had some engagement, virtual engagement, where we proposed that looking at what is happening, the democratic backsliding that we are all talking about, and it appears it's not going to go away anytime soon. So there's a need to have this kind of concerted effort to ensure that we actually confront it head on. So I had actually proposed in one of our conversations that there's a need to have something like a scorecard on democracy and governance within a region, to actually look at ourselves and start scoring as far as member states are concerned. Let's develop some kind of indicators based on which we are going to use something similar to what Afrobarometer is doing. But let's agree on indicators that you could do. And this scorecard would give opportunity to Wademos to actually come and present it to Mediation and Security Council, at least at our ambassadorial level, so that when you present this to member states, it will not be coming from the commission, it's coming from the CSOs, the people who are actually closer to the people, telling you, these are your scorecards. That would also gain some kind of traction. And it will go a long way, because usually whatever we present to the MSC at the ambassadorial level also find its way to the ministerial and subsequently to the heads of state level. So this is an opportunity for us to also have this. Now the third one, which is key in addition to this, is what we are trying to implement regarding the economic, eco-social, and economic, social, and cultural council, ECOSOC. That at this very moment, we are at its nascent stage. Indeed, 2 weeks or so from now, we'll have internal consultations at the ECOWAS level. All departments will be involved for us to deliberate on it, because let's cut across sectors. It's not only peace and security, but it talks about issues about free movement, issues about customs union. You know, ECOWAS in itself was established for integration purposes. So we are not actually ignoring or forgetting about what will drive the integration, even though we notice that peace and security has become one key thing, because without peace and stability, you may not be able to realize this very good objective of having economic integration. So we have extended to all departments within ECOWAS, and we'll be having internal consultations on that. Further to that, we would now open up and have regional consultation that would involve CSOs in the setting up of this ECOSOC. And the main idea being that this will give a platform to CSOs, and of course, it's also in line with our own instrument, which is the ECOWAS revised treaty, 1993, Article 81, particularly talks about the same thing, having these CSOs that would engage frequently to be able to actually get from them exactly what the people want. There will be, because it's become an organ, that would also be part of the decision-making processes of ECOWAS, so that the voices of the people would be heard, would be reflected in whatever thing that we do, because we are now talking about ECOWAS of the people. So if you are talking about ECOWAS of the people, how best to get the voice of the people done, having a platform that such views and whatever issues can find place to be ventilated and all that. So we think that the establishment of ECOSOC will give that kind of voice to the voiceless, and also help in ECOWAS in channeling its efforts in making sure that whatever it does, it has the people in mind to be able to drive that. So these three main ways that I've spoken about obviously serve as entry point. And this is not to say that we've never had a place for the CSOs. Indeed, WACSOF was set up for this purpose, but we all know what happened to WACSOF, West Africa Civil Society Forum, and we would not want to see a complete kind of demise of the voice of the people through WACSOF. The reason why we want to see how best we can resuscitate this, but of course through another platform that will be giving that kind of life to be able to also ventilate and have the voices of the community citizens. So I believe that if you're able to do this, obviously that would serve as entry point for WADEMOS and also for CSOs.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ebenezer. And if I should hear you well, you are suggesting that, you know, we kind of replicate some of the ways in which civil society engage more intensely at the African Commission level, where CSOs are scoring their own, you know, governments, you know, and making formal presentations and shadow reports at the African Commission. And I think we will come back to that and look more into what we can do as CSOs, you know, to influence some more beyond the sanctions. What can we do differently, especially for countries in transition like we see in Mali, in recent Niger, and all of that. Now I want to come to Sheikh. Yesterday we were looking at governance more broadly, and we agreed, or we discussed that if democracy should deliver for the people, one of the critical areas we need to fix is the politics of our different states. And what we have seen in our different countries is that there is an elite capture, where the elites have captured the political space, and politics has been reduced to a contest between the strongest. So it's about the fight for power and all the benefits that comes with power instead of addressing the real needs of the people. What do you think, as Wadimos, trying also to bring on board the generality of activists, civil society, democracy defenders, what do you think we can do collectively and in our different states as members of Wadimos in our different countries to ensure that we influence internal political party dynamics to be able to embrace and foster a culture of democracy within our different countries?
Merci beaucoup, Madame la modératrice.
Politicians are capturing power in Africa, but what we have observed is that the politicians are a minority. The observation is that we have a population that expresses its requests. And the request of the population is for more, for better governance and a better democracy. But the expectations of the populations are not met by the population, but by the politicians. And so there is a disconnect between those who have been elected to represent the people and the people. But then, like you said, we should not focus on the problems, because yesterday we talked about the problems, and today we need to evaluate or talk about the solutions. And the first way of talking about this solution is to accept that there's been victories with democracy. Democracy hasn't only presented us problems. And so it is when we recognize the victory of democracy that we'll be able to project or enforce democracy. And so we need to compare democracy after independence from 1960 to 1980, and then the democracy from 2000 to 2023. You've had a series of military regimes, coup d'etat, but we've had 20 years of democracy with the emergence of internet that has allowed to hear other voices, dissident voices, and then also brought out new forms of fight, of combat. There was a time of leaders, and now we are at a time of the community. And now Wadimos and Affectivists and other organizations are converging different communities through the internet. Yesterday I was taking notes while the discussion was going on, and so I'd like to read out what I took note of. The first point is that we need to redefine the mission of the CSOs. Our mission before was more focalized on the institutions such as ECOWAS, the states, the presidents, and I think that with this new dynamic we need to focus on the people, on the populations, and move towards what I call a convergence of ideas of the others, collective intelligence on issues of democracy. The second point is to integrate different approaches in the ways, cyber approaches, to the ways in which we deploy. Today we have internet facilitating our work, and we mostly fail to associate our interventions with the new innovative tools that we have available to us. And why must we change our approach and integrate the cyber approach? This is because we have a population that is connected online. Although we are told that a lot of people in Africa do not have phones, well, I think that this will constitute the minority because a lot of people have phones and are connected in Africa. And so we can use the internet to help the population really understand and promote democracy. If we do not do this, there will be disinformation on the internet that will in turn manipulate the population so that they support the military regimes or the different regimes other than democracy. Now, the third element is to promote citizenship. We need to ensure that the citizens for whom we put in place our initiatives need to have a citizenship mentality, because in Africa today we have different ecosystems. If Mali has been able to have effect on Burkina Faso and on Guinea, it's because there is a cyberspace that is shared where everything that happens in Mali, people in Burkina Faso, people in Guinea are interested, in knowing. And then that is why we today we need to talk more and more about convergence. We need to create a new space that will promote citizenship engagement. The fourth is to propose reforms that respond to the orientations, the citizenship orientation, and also the popular requests by the populations. And these reforms must also be connected to the internet and freedom of expression and freedom to intervene. My approaches are more connected to the internet because we are in a new world where we need to focus also on internet. The fifth point is to renew training. We need to train the populations on the basis of the knowledge we had of before. We need to change our approaches and train the population by inviting them to understand the new tools. And we need to integrate digital citizenship and the cyber democracy in the training so that the population will be more mature in using the internet, and then it will be difficult for them to be easily manipulated. Today we have an open civic space which allows for every African to be a militant and to carry out an activity that will have a social or economic or political impact. Again, the next point is that we focus too much on partners, and I think that what is important is that within our institutions we need to be able to find new ways of funding. I talked about the African the AFDB. AFDB is an African bank, but it is not able to fund CSO projects that will have far-reaching impacts. And then we have philanthropists. We have a lot of millionaires in the sub-region and who can support initiatives of Wadimos, for example. And so we need to create a new African fund that is funded by philanthropists. The next point is to develop a media approach. CSOs need to create media outfits, because if we do not do this, then those media outfits who have agenda, who have who wish to push propagandas, who have different agendas other than democracy, will be the ones to manipulate public opinion. And that is the case that we are facing today, the situation we are facing today. And then last point is to add value to our cultures so that we can carry out projects that have higher impact, that have greater impacts on the population. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And take advantage of the new media wave and the new technology that present that we have seen, and we should use these new ways to enrich the quality of governance and by extension consolidate and strengthen democracy in the region. And also the issue of citizenship. And I think that is critical, and I think I agree with you more. In fact, Sierra Leone would have gone into blazes on Sunday, but for the fact that citizens decided that we are not going to be a part of this. In fact, to use their words verbatim, citizens said that we do not care if you want to fight between yourselves. You can take up arms among yourselves, but no Sierra Leonean is ready to die anymore as a result of your political, in fact, somebody called it your political concepts. So that, I agree with you that CSOs, it is high time that we begin to reimagining how we are going to educate, raise awareness, and reconscientize our people to take advantage of the power that they have and begin to hold our leaders accountable. And thank you very much for that. And I come to you now, Madam Iber. You work in the gender space. You work a lot with women. Yesterday we have been talking about the next generation engagement to ensure that we preserve the investments that we're making. The issues of women have been left out, even within the feminist space, the CSO space. We have seen how it has become difficult to even get our leaders to enshrine or to adopt laws that would ensure that women are sitting at the table where they can make decisions. And without being gender biased, honestly, we have seen what happened in Liberia. And a lot of that, I remember when we went to Liberia for the assessment, the pre-assessment mission under the Wademos. One of the things that a lot of people expressed, they believed that because these women at the helm of decision at the Electoral Commission in Nigeria, in fact, one of them said, women like to preserve their image, so we're sure that they would do the right thing. What do you think we can do to ensure that more women, and when we're talking about women, we're also talking about young women. We're talking about how do you think the youth, in fact, I feel so sorry every time we talk about democratic reversals. When we talk about violence, it is the youth that becomes the focus. They have become, victims of democratic decline. How do you think we can ensure that young people, women, vulnerable groups like persons with disability, how do you think we can bring them into the discourse so that we all drive, the journey towards upscaling the integrity of democracy in the region.
Okay, thank you for that question. It's very important that the youth, especially women, since with disabilities, are co-opted into the electoral process and then governance, actually. For me, I think the right way to do it is like what Wademos just started. Mentoring is very important. You can't take away mentoring from, building the capacity of younger persons, especially women and persons with disabilities. It's important that when we mentor, we should also be able to open the space actually for them to participate, giving them leadership roles to be part of, listening to them, and then let them be part of decision making, especially within our organizations. And if I have to just take an example from what we do in my organization, we have established the Young Women in Politics Forum. And the essence is that we want young women to participate in politics from party level, to elective positions also. And in doing that, while we set up our campaign school, we were very intentional about having younger people, participate. And the youngest parliamentarian today in Nigeria was part of our campaign school. So, for civil society organizations, it's important for us all, to be intentional when we take certain decisions, create, avenues for the young people to come together to interact. There's, like Mr. Paul said while he was, giving us a breakdown of activities of Wademos. He's talking about next year being able to bring them together, either virtually or in person, for them to reflect amongst themselves, especially meeting partners from other countries. It will, broaden their understanding of electoral process, understanding of governance. And also we want to look at using the new media like he talked about. Media is very important, and if you look at the social media like we have now, it was actually what helped in Nigeria when there was NSAS. The youth were able to put themselves together, both men and women. For us, during the NSAS, we saw the capacity of young women, their leadership skills. It wasn't just about, young men. It was an opportunity for young women to participate, and, they did very well. So I think that we have to look out for them. We'll have to mentor them. We'll have to also give them roles to play because, when you just talk to people and then you are not giving them an opportunity to exhibit what they have been able to learn, you will see that, they will not be part of governance. And then it's important also, in party administration, we respect the older people. We acknowledge they have so much knowledge, but I think it's also important for us gradually, to begin to, infuse more young people so that they will learn from them, and then gradually the older people will step aside for the younger people to, participate. In Nigeria, I always tell the young women that I mentor, I give them this example and I say, look, if you continue to shy away from participating, we'll be speaking for young people to participate, and only the young men. We like that in Nigeria today, for the first time, the minister in charge of youth is a woman, a young person. Initially, they will just appoint someone of over 60, 70, and they will call that person youth minister. So for us, I think they listen to some of the things we've been saying that, look, we have qualified women that are youth also and should be given an opportunity to participate. So for the first time, a young girl is there. And we also want political parties to understand that in creating that office of the youth leader, it shouldn't also be for the men. We are yet to have, any political party in Nigeria give opportunity to a young woman, as the youth leader. But give and take, the young people are interested, the persons with disabilities are interested. We have a disability commission in Nigeria, but I don't know the age of the person that is there, but I can say that, I don't know, maybe you'll help me, it's not a young person. Yes, but I'm not an advocate of throwing away the older people, but I'm an advocate of, working together so they will learn from their experiences, and then the people should be gradually looking for a way to bow out honorably for the younger people, to participate. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It is critical because democracy itself espouses participation and inclusion, and we don't want a situation where, the percentage, the population with the highest percentage is being left out. But at the same time, we don't want inclusion as a tokenistic way of doing it. Not just women for the sake of women, young people for the sake of young people. We want young people, women, persons with disability that can deliver and that can ensure that the issues that borders around our political, our social, our economic advancement is being addressed when they're there. And now I come to you, Mr. Mutaru. I always say Africans blame everybody else except themselves. Our leaders, citizens, everybody, there's issues around neo-colonialism, but we do not actually sit to think. We have so much. God has blessed us with so many things that we could use, take advantage of to enhance our democracy. But we should not also oversight the global politics. So I want to come to you. How do you think as CSOs, WADIMOS, mobilizing, galvanizing, putting its energy, within the broader context of building movements, how do you think we could solidify democracy within the context of all the global geopolitics that we experience? I mean, we just saw how the transition governments, the military leaders that we have in Burkina Faso, in Mali, in Guinea, we see that they're all now moving towards, obviously, they're finding their own allies. But are these, for what purpose? Russia is also encouraging and embracing them, but to what end? So how do you think, as CSOs, we could, understand all these nuances and we are able to position ourselves to address, some of these politics outside, of our sub-region, to ensure that it does not suffocate us, and we are able to move democracy in a way, imbibing all the tenets, all the principles as well, but in our own context.
Thank you very much. Good morning to everyone. I'm happy to be here, and thank you for the invitation. And thank you to the WADIMOS team. Listen to the progress that has been made, even within a short period. It's very, very impressive. So I'm very happy to be here and participating in this. I work in the area of security, specifically in preventing violent extremism and radicalization in West Africa. But the question you ask is very, very relevant to CSOs and also to the area that I work in terms of security and its regional dynamics, and also how it relates to democracy and how we can sustain democracy here. If we look at democracy from the delivery side of democracy, it would make a lot of sense to focus in terms of this question. We're looking at the delivery of what I call the entitlements of citizenship, the capacity of democracy to deliver to the citizens and deliver the entitlements of citizenship. In our work, part of the reasons, or we believe that part of the reasons we have failed in terms of democracy and leadership within the region, it relates to the failure of states and failure of leadership and democracy to deliver the entitlements of citizenship. These are goods in terms of job creation, in terms of services, social provision of social services to citizens. In the Sahel, young people seem to listen to extremist groups because extremist groups seem to understand young people better than the states. Extremist groups understand the dynamics, the aspirations, and the interests of young people far better than the states. And so they are able to meet the aspirations of young people. How do we build movements to ensure that we prevail on leadership, on democracy to deliver for what it was originally intended? We need to understand the aspirations and the needs of citizens, especially young people. Young people, they are the ultimate demography for the sustenance of democracy. If we fail to understand young people and their aspirations, we will fail in terms of sustaining democracy within this sub-region. If you notice, it appears that the model of democracy we are practicing, not just the model, but also the structure and the systems in place to deliver, does not seem to be in sync with the interests and aspirations of young people and the dynamics of the system. And I say this in simple terms. For instance, internet, social media, very powerful in transforming a lot of things, and is good for all of us. But social media seems to amplify the aspirations of young people. It has exaggerated the expectations of young people, far beyond the capacity of their states to meet them. It creates and amplifies grievances that ultimately can lead to things like the SARS movement we saw in Nigeria and other phenomena within the sub-region. And so the system must be effective enough to respond to the needs and aspirations of the people. If we cannot see the differences clearly and respond to it, we will fail in terms of building the coalition that we need to build to prevail on the system to deliver. I'm sure yesterday we may have spoken about the fact that we place so much emphasis on the prescriptions for democracy, the holding of elections, setting up parliament, committees, parliamentary proceedings, and institutions that are meant to deliver. And yet those institutions have not delivered. They don't deliver. In fact, we are having so much over-concentration of institutions to deliver. And Mr. Paul just mentioned the Special Prosecutor's Office in Ghana here, a couple of years back when it was set up. Most people were excited because it meant that there's some significant focus on the issue of corruption. Unfortunately, the outcomes we're seeing does not point to that. In fact, in many people's view, we didn't need to set up the Office of the Special Prosecutor to do that because there are several other institutions that had the mandate to do that. But because we are so much in love with these institutions, setting up institutions, we did that. And we are at the same spot. In fact, we are losing because that's huge. That's a huge cost to the state. And so my long and short answer is that we need to focus on understanding the needs of the population, the needs of citizens. Leadership or democracy would fail. Democracy would not deliver. democracy would not guarantee development or prosperity if the focus of leadership is on power and not on the people. And that's what we're seeing. The people are the ultimate recipients of the goods. And so we need to deliver to the needs of the citizens. And we are not seeing it. There seems to be a huge disconnect between leadership and the people. And that's why we're seeing what we're seeing. And I ask the question in the first place, we are talking about democratic backsliding. In the first place, did we actually have democracy in place in West Africa? Did we have democracy in place? If you ask anyone to name just 2 examples of how a democracy should look like for us in West Africa, we will struggle. Even in the last 30 years, there appears to be some kind of progress we have made in terms of democracy. If we are asked to choose just one or 2 examples of how the intended democracy should be for us, we will struggle. So in my opinion, I'm not sure that we actually had a democracy or democracy in play. We're seeing the reversal of leadership or what the gains we have made in terms of the coups that we're seeing. It creates the impression that it's a symptom, it's a sign that we are backsliding on democracy. But did we actually have democracy in place? If we did have democracy in place, the institutions of democracy would have prevented the coup situations to happen. We don't have effective response mechanisms. People complain about grievances around corruption and other things. And the system that is meant to deliver in terms of responding does not exist. And so when people do not have a response mechanism in place, they will resort to what they believe works for them. And that's why we're seeing these things happen. I think I'll rest. I'm sure we'll have questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. And again, I hear, the issues around building citizenship, continues to come up as a very, very strong point. And I have always said, I think what we need to do is we need, for democracy to deliver, we need to invest in the people. And how do we invest in the people? We need, as CSOs, to engage. As we engage, we need to build positive anger agencies out of our people who will ensure that the leaders that we have elected deliver on their mandate, and not in the way they believe they should deliver, but in the way that enhances the aspiration of the people. And so before I go to the floor, ask a final question, which I would like all panelists to deliberate on. And that is the issue of civil society. Yesterday, it was clear that civil society, to a large extent, some have been captured. So I've been captured to the point that it now appears it's looking that we're at war with ourselves. We have become, it is a them versus us situation. It was clear in Sierra Leone. In fact, we normally say at National Elections Watch, we say we forgive the politicians because it's a competition. I mean, they would go after anyone that appears to want to divert, their interest. But it was civil society that disappointed us the more, because it was civil society who were bashing us. They were the ones who were inciting government against us. So what do you think, in 2 minutes, 2 or 3 minutes, what do each of you think we can do as civil society to re-engineer, to refuel, to remobilize and to remind all of us of where we were coming from, the fathers of activism, to remind of the objective for which this noble activism platform was. What do you think we can do to fortify ourselves so that we become immune and fortified from partisan politics capture? Each of you, yeah. I'll start with you.
Well, maybe I would be speaking from a perspective of somebody who is not a civil society person, and therefore maybe my views might not be exactly what those of you who are actually participants would have. From the outside perspective, I think we are having these challenges because of one, certain influences. Then the second one also be maybe the source of funding. You don't forget that there's an adage that whoever pays the piper oftentimes will call the tune. So if somebody is funding you to do certain things, then obviously that person who might be funding you might also have his or her own way of looking at things, doing things, objectives and all that, and that might also prompt how the funding comes. So if you do this, I give you that. If you don't do this, I reduce it. Would obviously also inform you. And that would shape the way you do things. So if you have certain organizations that actually fund you, that also have political aspirations, then obviously it will also color the way you also do your activism. And it's coming to play. Of course, you mentioned Sierra Leone, and I've also noticed that some of our friends that were in forefront of activism and advocacy somehow also found themselves, after the electoral cycle, also found themselves in government somehow. And I don't know how their position in government also open up spaces for the civil society in Sierra Leone in particular. I don't know how that. So it can also be either way. It could be positive, it could be negative. Somebody will find himself or herself in government and will use that opportunity to also open more space for civil society activism. Others will rather become anti-civil society once they find themselves at a table where probably silver spoons are used in eating and no longer finger and all that. So there is also that thing. So somebody from the outside, I would want to look at it from that two perspectives. One being political influence, another being who is funding. Yeah, so that would be my view on that. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, for us, it's a serious problem. It's what we are facing today in Nigeria. And then there's even a call for CSO regulation bill. We know that this bill will definitely cage civil society organizations, but if you look at it from another perspective, you begin to even really would ask for the bill, to come up. But considering the negative impact, we are not supporting it. But I mean, it's a situation that if you really want to be, open, you would think that such regulations will be there. So it will be able to know the civil society that is doing what. But that is beyond what the bill is even trying to regulate. So we are all kicking against it. I'll take, for example, what happened after our elections. The 2023 elections in Nigeria, it's not what we want to discuss today. And then the worst part was the off-cycle elections that we just had in 3 states, Kogi, Bayelsa, and Imo State. And then, what transpired there. But you see, there are some civil society organizations speaking up for the government, speaking up for INEC. And it's generally believed that they performed very low, questionable results and things like that. But some civil society organizations still come up to support INEC and to make excuses, for them. So I think, like he said, considering, the interest, political parties have also registered civil society organizations, and they fund some of them. And so they will be there to counter. But what can we do about this as, credible civil society organizations? We have to collaborate. And as much as they come out, all the other ones will also come out strongly, using the media, having press conferences to counter them. Because if we don't counter what they are saying, theirs will, turn around to be what everyone will believe. So for me, I think this is the time for us to collaborate more. This is the time for us also to x-ray civil societies and then begin to understand, the promoters of the organization and what they stand for, and be able to be bold enough to talk about those organizations that are not pro, people. So for me, it's about collaboration. It's about using the media. It's about being able at every point in time to counter what they are doing. Otherwise, they will set the tone, and then gradually you will see that the very good civil societies, the credible ones, will fizzle out. So it's a problem that everyone will have to come on board. And when we are doing this, it's not going to be restricted to just the country. We expect international kind of coalition. Like what Wademos is doing. Wademos will look at what is happening in West Africa, work with the genuine civil societies, and then from their own level, bring up some of these issues and then support the credible organizations as they, come up with their own statements. Yeah, thank you.
Yes, I think it's not just Nigeria. Here in Ghana, there's a new non-profit organization regulation that is in place, and we are talking about it variously in terms of how to respond to it, because we are not happy with the content, not everything in it. It's true that political leadership often view CSOs in a binary way. It's either you're for them or against them. And depending on what you're saying, if it's not in support of them, you're, in their mind, you're against them. And that problem exists here in many countries, obviously in West Africa. How do we get around those things? Because it's very true that there are some CSOs who do the work of government. They do the work of politicians. Irrespective of what it is, they do the work of politicians. This morning, if you were to take newspapers, and if you're familiar with the media landscape in Ghana, the special prosecutor yesterday almost spoke as though he was weeping. He was weeping and he was in a state of helplessness in terms of how to deal with corruption. And this morning, the way the media reported it, depending on what media house it is reported very differently. It's reported very differently. While some are seeking, the reports seem to project a resilient man, another group seem to report of him as a weak, who is, defeated at the court. So these things clearly is a reality. Some support the state, irrespective of what the state is doing, whether it's a failing, at a task, they are supporting the state. Some are also criticizing the state. How do we get around this? We need to build a coalition of like-minded, when I say like-minded, CSOs that mean well for the states and build a coalition that is strong enough, to work at these things. Because in coalition, you have a resilient and stronger team. We have to be consistent in terms of data-driven work that we do. Like we're seeing Wadamos and the reference to Afrobarometer. Today, Afrobarometer is very popular all over the place, the entire Africa. It's a very a credible source of reference. If we're able to have consistent data-driven interventions over time, our voices will be the louder voices. Because like the case you're citing, it's about whose voice is louder. INEC is, came out with whatever. Many people's mind, this is not what we're expecting. And yet there's a group of people who hail it. If you think otherwise, you have to speak your mind. And so at the end of the day, it's whose voice which is louder that will carry the day. So we have to work in terms of engaging in consistent data-driven interventions and responses to the issues that are before us. And that way, overall, eventually, we would prevail in terms of dealing with these issues. Thank you.
Merci. Rapidement, moi, je suis de ceux qui pensent.
I am one of those who believe that a lot of institutions will end up disappearing because they are not doing enough. To answer your question regarding the CSOs, we need to avoid copying the same thing that is being done within our administrations. We have systems that are not effective, and we have formal systems that are not effective. We have authorities which we don't have access to, and I believe that within the civil society we are copying, the same systems that exist within our administrations. We need to go away from those systems. If we want a society that only agrees with everything that is said, then you should put people, like-minded together. But if you want an intelligent society, you have to put together people who are intelligent, people who are committed. And in order to get there, we need to break away from the kind of democracy that we have today. We need to embrace representative democracy. So we need to go towards having a civic space that is open.
Very much to our panelists. I think as civil society, what we should be doing is to build a constituency of the willing, constituency of the committed, and a constituency where we can re-conscientize ourselves and the younger ones we're mentoring to imbibe the value of integrity in which the fathers and those of us they had nurtured and mentored imbibed as we do this work. And I think that is important. One of the things we have lost in the space is integrity, and how we bring that integrity back into the civic space is critical. And so now I would, send, the conversation to the audience. And this is how it's going to work. I'll take a round of 3 rounds, 3 from this side, 3 from this side at each intervention. Who's passing the mic around? Okay, there's a mic. Okay. I'll start with Professor Prempren. And then I would go to Marcella, would go table by table. Do we have somebody? And yes. And then on this side, the first table, Nana, and yes. And then who's the last? Okay, Esther, from this side.
Okay.
Yes,
Thank you to the panel for a very incisive conversation around civil society and how we might make impact on the issues before us. I would like to start by saying that, you know, it's really what we learn from social science for the kind of work we do is really the primacy of organization. Or as they put it, organization determines everything. Organization is the reason why a minority can have more power in the political space than a disorganized majority, right? I think it's why a small number of political elites can have far more power than the whole citizenry because they are better organized behind political parties and the like. It's also why the youth can be more numerous than the elderly and yet not have as much power. Or women can be more numerous in our population than men and yet not have as much power as the men. So clearly, I think there's enough empirical evidence to support this. And even civil society, the reason why we have more voice than the majority of citizens is because we are organized as a collective, as opposed to lone citizens just disorganized. So clearly, organization is what I think, you know, gives us the power. And that is why we must harness all the possibilities within our space for collective action. Within the space we're in, you know, some of the things that at CDD, as a Ghana-focused CDD civil society organization, some of the learnings that we've had. This year is our 25th anniversary, and reflecting on the 25 years of our work, what we have we're learning is that in our work as civil society, democracy, 1990, post-1990 democracy produced a different kind of civil society, which is us. These are advocacy groups, not membership-based, therefore relying purely on the power of their advocacy and their ideas to push democracy. Before we came on the scene as, you know, CSOs, civil society, media foundation, all of these forms, where the trade unions and the teachers associations and the professional bodies, they were the civil society of the pre-democratic period. They fought the military regimes. They really made a lot of progress. Bar associations and other nurses associations, teachers, you know, they made a lot of progress. What we've noticed is that since democracy, they have tended to vacate that space. They've become a little bit parochial, more concerned about their own occupational and material interest, and we have come into that space. But there's still a great deal of value that they bring that we don't have, which is that, one, they are self-funded. They don't write proposals to donors or anything. They are more or less a bit more organic, and they also have members, which matters a lot, right? Which is that they can put bodies on the street. You know, they have economic leverage over government in certain ways that we don't have. They can go on strike, they can do things. So one of the things we've been trying to work out at CDD is how do we bring back into the space? How do we encourage these earlier forms of civil society, which are still around, but have disengaged from the civic space? How do we get back in solidarity with them so that we can leverage their voice and their unique advantages to the benefit of the projects that we're working on? So to this end, we've had a series of meetings with, say, the Ghana Medical Association. We've had, we've called the private sector in for breakfast meetings to try and understand why is it that you have pulled back. Of course, we know some of the answers. Democracy has been hugely beneficial to, say, lawyers, right? So, you know, they are profiting from democracy. They are the ones who dominate our parliaments. They are in government. You know, everything is going beautifully well for them. So, but I think civil society needs to understand that we cannot do this alone, and that we must, the burden is on us to really initiate these kinds of efforts to build coalitions with other forms of civil society who are still around but have disengaged. That's number one. Number two, I think, is that, we have segmented a number of civil society, especially when it comes to youth, right? Youth-based civil society, and I think the experience, what I'm saying also carries there too in terms of, enlarging the coalition. Youth is a transient category. We have all been young before, right? So it's a transient category. Every category is transient. Even, the older cohorts will disappear at some point. But there is value in building cross-generational coalitions. Considerable value. For example, in Ghana recently, when our economy went, through some huge turmoil and turbulence, the pensioners found themselves all of a sudden, at the receiving end of the, economic turmoil. Their pensions were at risk of being slashed, and, there were a lot of things going on there. And these are people who, in the past, basically were not used to collective action. It didn't bother them. Their years as young people was over, and then they were just relying on investments in government treasury bills and all of that. All of a sudden, there's going to be a haircut on those things. And so they realized that, hey, we are also vulnerable. So even they started to picket at the Ministry of Finance, right? So when we are in this mesh together, there are potential, the potential for collaboration across generations is huge. And I think young people must not feel that because to this, the older generation they are still the gatekeepers in terms of change. If you don't really collaborate with them and, and build solidarity with them, some of the openings we need are not going to be open. They can just be the gatekeepers and shut the door closed forever, right? So I think, again, intergenerational coalition building is critical. And for us, regionally, I think one resource that I think Paul mentioned, which we have incorporated programmatically into WADEMOS, is the democreatives. This is a term we have coined to capture the idea of creatives in democracy, doing democracy work by leveraging the unique resources of creatives, the creative sector. And that's a huge thing. Whether or not we are talking, phones or no phones, music, film, the arts, these are resources that circulate very, very well within our region. Young people, whether they are singing, Afrobeat from Nigeria or from Ghana, we all dance to it, we understand it. There is huge potential in the creative sector in West Africa. Huge potential, not just Nigerian movies, but all across. And really, I think, we must really think strategically about how we harness that potential, not just the entire youth cohort, but a segment of it that has great, great, great potential for civil society work is the creative sector. How do we draw them into the space? How do we use them? 2024 elections coming in Senegal, in Ghana. If we reach them before the political parties reach them to do a jingle about vote buying, right? If before the political parties get to one of these big stars, we already have them, a program with them, and they are doing a jingle around or song around not selling your vote, right? Just imagine the effect that might have, right? But if a political party gets to them first, it would have the adverse effect for us. So one of the reasons. Final point is the level at which we operate, national versus local. A lot of our democracy, advocacy, and efforts are concentrated at the national level. And of course, especially in Ghana, where we have never, since the colonial period, never elected a mayor. There is not a single mayor in Ghana who is elected, is all appointed by the president. This is how bad our democracy is, right? It's a very Accra-centric democracy. But the difficulty with operating at the central level is that collective action is much more difficult there. It's difficult to break, right? If we had stronger democracy at the local level, if we had stronger local government, where resources, where a lot of resources are left at the local level to solve development problems, I can bet you that we will have more young people in politics, in local government politics, changing things at the local level. The cost of entering politics is much higher at the national level. If we localized our democracies better, more women, because they are more community activist types, will actually come up in our politics. And we would see a lot more collective action at that level because it's a smaller unit. But the central government level, trying to change everything there, the cost of breaking in there is much, much higher. So I think strategically we should push for a lot more decentralization in our countries, a lot more devolution of power, a lot more local democracy. And once we open those spaces, I think you would see that the change is easier, would be easier, I think, just generally just looking at just scale, as a matter of scale, we could have a lot more effect at that level. So in our own programmatic design and how we're operating or operationalizing democracy in the region, we should continue to fight, yes, at the national level because the gatekeepers tend to be there, but we should more and more, I think, be looking locally for change and for spaces where we can make change. Thank you.
Thank you. I really want to continue a conversation from where Prof stopped on the potential for collaboration. But first and foremost, let me thank the panel for the insightful thoughts you have put on the table. I'm thinking through what are the most effective models to generate the kind of change we desire in this sort of response to democratic recession. Whilst I'm thinking through this, I really welcome the idea from Prof as to how we can leverage on the trade unions, the teachers' unions, and all those entities, the market women, those entities that have existed before the formalization of this civil society actually took center stage post-1990. But a much more recent departure from the model is actually the rise of social movements. And there's a cold war going on between civil society and social movements that we've not taken cognizance of. And that's in effect showing, because when I had a conversation with them, they said civil society is too slow. We are tired with what's happening with our democracy. We need rapid intervention. The models of engagement are no longer working. We need to take to the street. So what are the most effective, and that's the question I'm going to put to the panel. Apologies for that. But what are the most effective models to generate and improve the sort of response that we desire? And how do we intend to bridge this sort of gap between the social movement and civil society? Because ultimately, we are all poised to achieve the same results, but taking different, routes. So, yeah, that's my question. Thank you.
Hello. Yeah. Thank you to the panel. I mean, I think my opinion is one of the well done job. And just when you started, my focus flashed to the byline there, entry point for CSOs. And I quickly pick up the ECPF framework, you know, which I'm sure so many of us are very conversant with. And there is this adage that people perished for lack of knowledge. And I think one of the major problems we are having, either as CSOs or NGOs, is because of that lack of knowledge. And I quickly picked, as I've said, on the ECPF, and I realized that from the Article 1 to the Article 125 of the ECPF, there is hardly any of the components that civil society organizations' responsibilities were not mentioned. So if we as CSOs choose not to go for knowledge, I think we'll probably run into problems. Now, why is OneNep, EcoNet, and now Wademos seems to be having a free, like on a free road, you know, and accelerating as much as they want, is because of the knowledge they have and that they have equally ceased to use, for the development of the organizations. If you look at, I can quickly read one or two, some few articles that relate to the civil societies in the ECPF. Article 29C, Article 45F, Article 53, K and L, Article 57, Article 69, Article 86, Article 90, Article 94, Article 95, and Article 114 specifically made the hammers on the relationship the ECOWAS have with the CSOs, you know, and this is where the issue of the EcoNet, ECOSOC comes in. And the formation of WASOC is a child brain of ECOWAS. And please, my brother Ebenezer, don't let it die. Because I remember I was one of those people, the foundation members, and I know the import. I know how much we achieved then within a very short period. Although there were not so many civil organizations as we have them now. But then they made tremendous progress, you know, in infiltrating ECOWAS and getting so many issues resolved. So if you look at all this then, therefore, the question that equally comes to my mind is that how far has this CSOs fared in getting or in trying to chart courses for themselves at getting into the ECOWAS? Because if you don't know how to get by, and we sat behind and continue to criticize ECOWAS is not doing this, ECOWAS is not doing that, then they are not likely to make effort, or rather, they are not likely to make inroad into into how we could get our problem resolved. And so, ECOWAS will please continue to help WASOC to grow and resolve any kind of crisis that might be, that they might be facing for now. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and thank you to the panel for your interventions. One of the things that I think came up and which I completely agree with is that we do, in some of the, for some parts, there is a certain crisis of integrity. And I think That's one of the things that we would have to look at as civil society organizations. There are many that are doing good work, that are correct organizations, work with ethics, but there are some also where there are issues. We talk about transparency and accountability a lot, but there are challenges sometimes with transparency and accountability within civil society, and we know it. And these are some of the things that I think, as we are championing democracy, we have to stick to our principles and our values. We must practice what we preach. And so I'm an advocate of one of the suggestions that have been made, that I've heard: self-regulation, having, for example, a peer review mechanism of sorts. So it's not government regulation. I mean, the government, we may have the issues that we have with the laws that we would need to deal with. But we ourselves, as a sector, if we are looking at ourselves as a sector, have to find a way of self-regulating so that we are able to, for the most part, because we may not be successful in doing it, completely, but for the most part, be able to keep out the bad ones, the ones that are giving us the bad names. So that's one of the things that I think we could think about. And even maybe for Wademos is one small group, but we could even, members of Wademos, we should be able to regulate ourselves. Not everybody can become a member of Wademos. And if you are a member of Wademos, you stick to certain principles and values. If you don't stick to those principles and values, sorry, you are no longer a member of Wademos. You cannot use the Wademos name or, So we have to have some of these things, because I think that we need to sanitize our space, if I should use those words. The other thing is the unhealthy competition that I spoke about yesterday. I do think that we have to make a deliberate effort to support each other. If there are organizations have certain capacities, certain resources that you need as an organization, or of somebody else who needs them, point them to that organization. Let's work with each other. Let's strengthen our front, and let's share our resources. Because one of the things, we talk about funding for a lot. I want to give an example. WACSI has opened an office in Nigeria. CDD West Africa has given us space, free. They are given, it's not a big office. We are co-locating with CDD, and for the next 2 years, they have said, as you establish your presence and everything here, you can work with us, you can stay and work in our office because we have the space and we are not using it for now. Those are some of the what are some of the resources that we can share? It doesn't always have to be free, because then, we cannot stay in that space at CDD forever and not pay anything. That would be wrong. But let's find ways of supporting each other, because there are certain things that some of us have and others don't, and we could support. Even if you have to pay something for it, at least let's find that way of supporting each other instead of pulling each other down. And sometimes we do that because we want resources. So sometimes we do that so that we look better than the others. So please, let's address that problem, because I think it's a problem that we have to work within. And the third is about the resourcing. I like the idea about local philanthropy, and I do think, we have a long way to go in terms of building that infrastructure and getting that resourcing to support the kind of work that we do. Africans give, and so it's not as if local philanthropy doesn't exist. It does, but it exists in a different form, and it supports different things other than the democracy consolidation work that we are talking about. So the challenge really is, how do we enable our people to give towards this work? And that is going to take a lot. First of all, it's going to take even a mindset shift for ourselves, because many of us have become very dependent on external philanthropy. So that's number one. Number two is building the infrastructure, the kind of legislation, regulations, policies that actually support local philanthropy and enable individuals and companies and others to give. That's also the other side of it. And then, of course, the culture aspect, where we now build that kind of ownership, so communities actually see what we are doing as theirs. Because people give because they believe in what the others are doing, and they believe that it's going to benefit them. So how do they not see NGOs as something external? Oh, they are coming to help us, rather than we have to work with them to help ourselves, because we are all part of this. And that is something we have to work on. And again, the issue of trust. If people don't trust you, they will not even one kobo, one peso. They won't give it to you. And yet we are looking at local philanthropy. So we have to be the ones that people can trust. And again, that circles back to the transparency and accountability issue. Thank you very much.
Okay, I will start my point. I have 3 or 4 points to raise. I will start with one of the issues is lack of patriotism amongst civil society organizations. I was asked to make a presentation in University of Abuja because I graduated there for the student union government. So I was talking to them about patriotism, about fighting for your fatherland as against a mercenary. That's what Machiavelli said. A patriot fights to save his fatherland. A mercenary fights to save his head. So one of them said, sir, but you graduated here, you were a student union parliament speaker, and we knew that in 2020 that you people blocked Lokoja Kaduna Road for 5 hours and vehicles were destroyed because Obasanjo increased the fuel when he became president. I said, yes. If you ask me what I know now, if I have opportunity of doing it, there is a better way to do it than to destroy things in the name of unionism and activism. I say you have to engage. Mahatma Gandhi has rules of engaging the government and engaging. Before, the government will always push back. Most civil society organizations now, the language is, let's hit the street. Let's do this, let's do that. It shouldn't be a motor garage kind of approach. And that leads to issue of lack of think tanks amongst the CSOs. CSOs must have think tanks. Those that will come up with strategies to engage the government, those that will come up with strategies to engage institutions and authorities. The violent and the gra ways are not usually it. We're not saying that the government do not understand. Sometimes they also understand that hitting the streets and also protesting. We did it last year, Madam Ebere can be our witness, when the National Assembly threw out the bills. We all mobilized, civil society mobilized, they spoke with one voice. Because we had engaged them, we went there during the hearings, they didn't hear us. It was justified. We blocked the National Assembly. But many civil society organizations today, on their own understanding of activism is, you have to use it by force. Have you engaged? What are those? There is lack of understanding between advocacy, activism. There's the back channel engagement. There's the policy engagement that you have to engage the government with. Another one is the syndrome that, what I will say, that something that have befallen the media. Apologies to the media, the mainstream media. Today, the problem that the mainstream media has is that they rely on what they see on social media. Nobody does research again. You go to social media, you pick. information and you go and you put it out without proper researching. I will use our Electoral Act, for example. Not many Nigerians understand when it comes to collation of results. CSOs failed Nigerians in really understanding and picking those things for Nigerians to understand most of those things. I did something, we did a radio PSA, jingles, on how winners emerge, because we sat down with our EAs, we said, what are those contentious areas that will cause problems for this election? How winners emerge. And it became an issue during the tribunal. 24%, 25% from the 24 states, plus FCT or not. We ran this public enlightenment program 3 months before the election, and it became a debate. Civil society, we are not part of the problem. We should be a solution. We should provide issues for people to discuss it, constructively understand, and raise the bar for civic understanding. And that is where we derive our name. Civil society organization. People that promote civil liberty, people that promote civil way of engagement. Are we doing same today? I also talk about, we can't differentiate between activism and the other side of advocacy. What happens when to end? The NSAS, after the NSAS, we had what we call an intergenerational discourse in Uyo. We brought in the youths and some arrowheads in the NSAS with the old hands. I won't mention them, but I can mention them here. We brought them there in Uyo for 3 days of discussion, powered by Osiwa. What went wrong? The NSAS for a few days or for a few weeks achieved its purpose, but at the end, it caused more harm to the society than what it was said to be. Stories came up. The young people, some of the old people that organized the 2012 subsidy protest came out. They said, no, you go back. You old people, you have disappointed us. We don't need you. This is our generation. This is our thing. We need to run it our thing. You still need, like Prof said, you still need those people that understand the game, that understand the way, that can do those advocacy while you are on the street engaging. It was acknowledged. They acknowledged that, yes, there was a missing link of trying to use the people that speak to power and power and hear them. And that was exactly what also happened, because you see that the government pushed out the thugs, not only the security people, thugs. And what was supposed to be a movement for change now turned out to become something that, had we known, we wouldn't have done this. So CSOs should begin to differentiate. We should be able to understand disinformation and misinformation and fake news is doing a lot to not just the media, but also civil society organizations. The things we base our activism on, where do we get them? Do we research? Do we check? Do we even do proper research to understand the issues? I asked some people protesting, why are you protesting? So they say we should protest. You are coming out to protest. They say you should protest. What is the main cause of this protest? And that's why most of those protests, you see, they are being hijacked by people that don't have knowledge and understanding of the cause. I think civil society organizations need to come back. There is need for more collaboration. How do we work with the media? There is antagonism between the media and civil society organization. The media believe that, the civil society organizations, they have money. They have donor money. They have given you people money. Bring the money. Bring out the money. You need to collaborate with the media. There are certain things your 20 people on the street cannot solve, but with constructive media engagement, you will reach wider population, wider audience, and seek support for the cause that you are pushing. But if you are working at par with we need to understand that media people are partners in the change that we are pushing. Media people are part of advocacy. Their advocacy is using their platform to do a mass awareness creation and civic engagement. So we need to rethink and come back. What are those institutions that are critical that we need to collaborate with and engage them in the course of our work? I rest my case.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ebenezer, for bringing this up on the scorecard. I think it's an extremely important entry point for civil society. Personally, when, we did the scorecard on the Maputo Protocol in Ghana, and it happened to be the first scorecard that was done. When we did the scorecard, that was when I realized a lot of things that we overlook in the course of the work that we do. And so if we do more of this country level, all the threats, we see them on a daily basis, and it is easy for you to design if you do it so well, because if you use the methodology it's supposed to give you the recommendation, it comes with some sort of advocacy, whatever, everything. There's a lot if you do it so well. And even at the AU level, it was a project that was started with Plan International, but at the AU level, now they have scaled it and developed a continental framework that gender civil society organizations can actually look on to do, So for me, it's very important. We can't underscore the importance of this scorecard if we really want to protect democracy in the next 10, 20 years. We really have to work extremely hard on that. And that also requires a lot of capacity, because you need to have a lot of capacity to be able to do this sort of work. And then it leads me to say that if Wademos have the capacity to train, knows how to do the scorecard, or some can get a member who have done it before to train others to be able to do it, so they can do it in country for them to assess, what is happening, and then use it as a platform to work. That would be extremely important. The other thing also had to do with the word solidarity in this movement is missing in the conversation throughout yesterday till today. There are certain issues that are recurring in almost all the West African countries, and that is this NGO bill and all that. As we speak in Ghana, this is going on. We need a united voice against this. We need a united voice against this. We can't go on doing things the way we are doing in silos and expect a different result. The lamentation from our special prosecutor who is supposed to fight corruption tells us that we need to come together to even identify state institutions that are in line with what we want to achieve, to begin to be their backbone to cry on. You could tell the man feel he's left alone. And this is not the first special prosecutor to go through this lamentation cycle. We've had one that literally resigned. He said, I can't go on again. So you see the reports that keep coming. You do a report and your report is literally rubbished. Meanwhile, the thing has happened and everybody knows it has happened. But the political class, it tells you, you can't even run to the Council of State, because when a Council of State member is touched, the judiciary some way, somehow will overturn it to favor the person because it's a Council of State member. Meanwhile, the Council of State is supposed to be the highest form of respect. Elders of the land that can speak to the executive when they are going wrong. So I think we need to look at some of these things that is happening and see how we'll come with a united front. I like what Prof said, that the power of organizing, coming together, and it's making even smaller, minutest people take control. As members in the Wademos group, how do we build on each other's strength and not recreate things to start new. I mean, if you go to Nigeria, Yaiga is doing youth organizer. They train, it's a West Africa thing that they train young people. How do you organize? How do you do community then? You know, every year we have our West Africa Young Women in Politics Forum. Several organizations are doing something. We need to find a common ground as an entry point for CSOs. Now, if the program is West African focused, how do we make sure that other Wademos members come on board and push the agenda, have a united voice and push agenda? And also sometimes we can even learn from our colleagues. I'm doing something on gender in Ghana. My mama is doing something in Nigeria. He can call me and say, baby girl, that's how she calls me. So, baby girl, this and that is what I'm doing. I can also call her and say, hey, mommy, I'm doing this, so that we can find a common ground. Until that, we'll continue working in silos, and we are not coming together. And they see us. They are excited we are doing this because they see, they are not together. So they can't push as much as we want them to push. So we need to find these entries and all that. And one thing that keeps bothering me is, how will CSO today take advantage of the presence of young people on social media? Because now young people are not interested in the normal conversations that you are having in this room. But how do we make sure that it becomes a bit of fun to them, to be able to be interested in talking about it? The TikToks and all those places that they source for information from. How do we make this democracy and the conversation all that we are doing? So I feel like the three things we need to look at if we really want to counter some of because of course when we are able to go to social media, participation, representation is going to be high. Young people are going to understand what democracy and governance is about, and why the need for them, why politics affects their everyday life, even on social media. Then we begin to have that conversation. We are looking at that. And of course, the threat in civic space, the close-up in civic space, we are able to talk to our government and say, some of these laws that you are bringing input is so-called NGO bills and all that. It's not the best. How do we address it? Wademos, members, I think in the next 1 or 2 weeks, Wademos need to start something. CDD Ghana, everybody, Waxy, we all need to come together in Ghana to start a conversation, because the government is bent on passing this MPO bill before this parliament rises, and that's a very dangerous thing. The composition and everything, when you have a government to decide when your renewal is supposed to be done, and maybe you've spoken against the government, so you become I think CDD will be the first organization they will close, because they've done, they are talking for LGBTQ people, so they say, these ones, let's close them, because they want to pass this family whatever bill. So these are some of the things that we need to come together and really look at it critically and address ASAP. In fact, we need to start this very minute, because they are doing things in haste. And you see, when some of these things that they all support goes to parliament, it's like, hey, we have won. Let's do it. Let's push. Let's keep these people out. Let's try to do something and get the conversation moving. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all the contributors. And I agree with all. I think the issue that we face is so urgent that something has to be done very, very quickly to address. Otherwise, we are in trouble already. And so I'll hand over to the panelists, and we can have 3 minutes each. Just to respond to some of the issues that have been presented. A lot of them are comments, and Marcella asked the question. So, Over to you, and then we can,
Thanks very much. I guess we've really got good feedback from colleagues participating. Most of the issues that were raised were add-on to what we as panelists discussed here, or to make sure that whatever we said, they are also contributing to that. So I actually saw most of them as positive comments and contributions to what we said over here. Except from our side, I guess Esther was trying to highlight the need, or the point that there's a need to have this kind of scorecard thing that I put out. That if you're able to do that, we would have our foot on the door. That would also open up more spaces for us, because this one would be informed by research. And when your research is done and done right, I mean, in many cases, people cannot dispute. They have no option than to go with what the results, the outcomes, and the recommendations that actually come with them also. So it's something that if you're able to do, it would make us also have a say at the table, because it is based on the outcomes, the findings of the research, the scorecards, that would push member states to discuss. And once they start discussing that, then that means we already have a foot on the door. So I would urge that if there is a way of doing it, please let's do it. The earlier we start, the better for all of us. And that would be a very good entry point for Wademos and for civil society. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I think we are all in agreement that it's time for us to work together. Esther, I like what you said, but you know I call you up every time to ensure that our young people are involved, young girls from Nigeria are part of what you're doing. But from what Prof said, I think it's important actually for me, because I've taken a lot of notes here on why it's important for us to go back, you know, to the people that fought for independence, constitution, amendment, and things like that. For me, I've just put down here the NLC and the TUC, including the market women. They are very important for us to work with, but at the same time, you know, they have also, in Nigeria, I'm speaking about Nigeria, taken a kind of partisan interest. Like the last election, NLC came up fully to endorse the Labour Party. And I think I was a member of Labour Party. At the time, I was a member of the National Working Committee of Labour Party. We made sure that we did not allow NLC to, you know, get involved with the party, but remain as Labour Union. I think that was what helped us. You know, they didn't come out to endorse candidates, but they worked, you know, underground to support any candidate of their choice. So for NLC to have endorsed Labour Party in Nigeria is a huge setback for what we are talking about. In Imo State, you know, during the off-cycle election, the Labour leader, the chair of the NLC in Nigeria, was in Imo State. Yes, he stayed, but for the government, they felt he was there to endorse the Labour Party candidate, and he was really dehumanized. He was beaten, you know, things like that. So we want to work with them, but we need a Labour union that is not partisan. Because if we want to work with Labour union that is partisan, it will also dent, you know, our own integrity. Yeah, so I think also we need to work with professional bodies like NBA for the Nigerian Bar Association, and then the Federation of Women Lawyers, different professional groups. We need to work with them. Yes, I think that's majorly what I want to say. The idea of working with the creative sector is very good. I saw it, in Ethiopia when we were there for the African Women Conference. People from Nollywood were there, and we had a conversation around using Nollywood to support some of our issues because it's important. We believe in them. The younger people watch them. They trust them. So I think it's a good idea. I think NDI in Nigeria is working with Two-Face on what they call, what is it? Yes, Vote Not Fight campaign. Yes, thank you.
Yes, I want to begin by making reference to what Esther talked about, the fact that we're seeing these problems within the state, but sometimes it's also helpful to think that there could be some very good examples within the state, but they are helpless in terms of leaders, in terms of doing the right things. They are helpless in terms of what to do. Because when you're within that kind of system, there's a tendency for groupthink or group act. So in spite of the fact that you're willing to do the right thing, everyone else is doing the wrong things. So how do we ensure as civil society actors, we identify actors that we could help promote the cause in a way that is prominent? As example, we see in the Office of the Special Prosecutor that we all believe that is intended for a good cause. How do we build, a sense of coalition around such individuals and such institutions? And so it's important that we feature that as part of what we're looking to do to ensure we can have better outcomes. And also, Prof also talked about the idea of democracy, in our case in Ghana, being Accra-centric democracy, which is very, 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 very true. In the space, within the security space that I'm very familiar with, there's a significant gap or gulf between, in terms of trust between security forces and the local population. But if you just, look at Accra alone, you would not see the entire picture. There are issues with citizenship, which you may not see in Accra. You talk to authorities like NIA, Electoral Commission, National Health Insurance Authority. In Accra, it's a very different reality. If you go to the local communities outside of urban centers, it's a big, big pervasive problem that is not, amplified here in Accra. So it's important that we focus on, the entirety of the spaces that we're looking at to ensure that we are looking at the issues in a very holistic way. And I'll end by making reference to somebody made a comment referring to, I think he talked about, social movements and how we can work together, or how they threaten that there seems to be some friction between those social movements and CSOs. I don't think there should be a source of threat. What I see is that many of these social movements seem to be revivalist in terms of goals, in terms of objectives. They're seeking to live out a certain past heroic, goal or fantasy, and they are not sustainable very often. And so we are cut out, with an objective, a consistent, focus on objective will be totally different from what a social movement is meant to do. And so that should not be a source of threat or a source of worry. So I think these are the things I would say about what has been said so far. And I'd like to make the point that we need to notice that there's an expanded space. There seems to be expanded typology of civil society work. Now we're seeing new courses. How do we legitimize those courses and make them part of the focus of civil society work, and embracing those, courses like climate change, climate justice, and things like that. AI, how do we ensure that AI, internet access, and things like that become a focus of what civil society should be engaged in? Because in the next 30 years, these are going to be the realities of our engagement and our existence. And if civil society does not see and incorporate this, we would be at the very poor end in the end. Thank you.
J'ai 3 minutes. Mes interventions.
I'm going to talk about opening up
Sur la question de l'organisation.
with regards to organization.
J'ai été mal compris ou je me suis mal exprimé. Il faut s'organiser.
I think we need to organize ourselves.
Mais l'organisation, pas une organisation copiée sur le modèle de nos États.
But not an organization that is copied on the model of our states. We say that ECOWAS is not accessible. CSOs need to be accessible. I think organization means having, a strong leadership, which will help us mobilize ourselves. I'll give the example of Senegal. We talked about Macky Sall and his speech, but no civil society organization in Senegal can raise its hand and say that Macky Sall changed his decision because of the work they've done. And to respond to the question of Bernadette on which model is more effective, I think it's to have actors within the civic space who are committed. Not a strong CSO, but a civic space that is strong, that is free, and that has commitments to make. That is why we need a collective citizenship. We need to all understand that we have a common problem and that we all need to contribute towards resolving these problems. And I would end by talking about the position that we have to have as CSOs. We do not need to make the same mistakes as our politicians. We do not need to be condescending or look down on the population or citizens and see them as people who are ignorant. On the contrary, we know that change only comes from the population, and so we need to involve the population, and we need to make them weapons that will help us resolve these problems. The issues that we are raising here have been raised since independence. Until now, we've not been able to find solutions, proper solutions to them. So maybe we need to review our strategies, because I think that the means that we had to try to resolve the problems have not really worked. And so to change the paradigm, we need to focus on civil society actors, and then we need to work collectively, work towards a convergence of the communities. And this is the convergence that will help us resolve the issues that we are facing now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We're like 20 minutes behind schedule.
And so, except someone want to say something completely different from what has been said, are there any other contributions to be made? Yes, Professor. Yes. Founder of
If he wants to say something, I think we will give him. We can give him the floor to say a word or two before he runs away.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Professor Jima. We're pleased to have you with us.
And he's also on the council. Sorry to interrupt.
Yes, he's
Wademos as well. So very relevant for this discussion.
So thank you, colleagues. Thank you, friends. Yes, I'm here mainly because I am on the advisory council of Wademos. And then I also wanted to get lunch, a free lunch. But I intended to be here yesterday and today, but my time and attention have been claimed by other meetings, so I've tuned in online, in and out. Just listening to the great discussions you've had here, lot of great ideas put on the table. I just thought to maybe flag two things and to recommend one thing. The first thing I wanted to flag is that I do worry about, I think it's easy to get into the fallacy of instrumentalizing democracy as something you do so that you create prosperity and maybe security and safety and so on. Because if that's what we want to do, the question is, what those of us in this room or involved in Wademos, what do we really know about economic development or social development that we can help society to achieve? I think we are essentially here because we know something about political governance. We know something about how to structure society, structure constitutions, structure laws so that it begins to deliver certain norms and values and reflect certain norms and values. Those norms and values are not necessarily knowing how to put together economic policy or how to get our governments to be more distributive and to be inclusive. Those are a little bit more, those are good things, but I'm afraid very often they lie beyond our means, and that we have to think back to the 1960s, 70s, 80s, when the general idea was that what the African needs is economic and social development, and industrialization and whatever. And so politics should be, and political power should be handed over to a few people who know how to make this happen. Because as we all know, for all those decades, none of that materialized, at least not for much of Africa. So we should be careful not to walk back to that lane, because that is the lane that if you begin to walk that, then you would wish to have a Kagame as your government. But I'm not sure that's what Wademos wants to do. Then you shouldn't have democracy in your title at all. So just be careful in that. If you want to choose things to focus on, there should be things that help to grow and protect the environment within which we as civil society can function and function effectively. That means more of a focus on things like how we can mentor and peer learn from each other, how we can build skills in advocacy as CSOs, what kinds of technical capacities we need to be able to function effectively as CSOs, and also what we may do to navigate the usually hyper-partisan political environments in our societies and in our countries. To my mind, these are modest. They may sound modest, but those are a little bit more within our reach than some of the more ambitious, very important goals, but for which we don't have the tools, the skills, or the capacity to do. There is something great about Wademos, and that is the focus on solidarity. But I think because there are so many things that you can do with solidarity, but we cannot do all of them, Wademos should identify the core norms and institutions of democracy around which it wants to mobilize solidarity. And so, for instance, when it comes to what norm and institution Wademos should be defending and protecting and building and mobilizing solidarity, we should identify those. And I'm not sure we have done that completely. I think we should just identify the very key ones without which we cannot exist and function as civil societies, and then focus on that for 2024 and beyond. But thanks for the opportunity to be here. You are all doing great work, and look forward to a greater work, greater deeds in 2024.
Thank you so much. What a way to end the panel. And thank you, Professor Jima, for your wisdom. And I do agree with you that it's a journey, and we take baby steps. At the end of the day, what is important is that we work towards achieving our goals. And thank you for giving us those fundamentals, those foundations that we can take advantage of, because it's within our means. We see it, it's workable, and it's practical, and it can help us, jump towards the more difficult and challenging paths that that lies ahead of us. I think it's been a very, very, very enriching conversation, and I want to thank all the panelists. And before we leave, in the midst of the challenges, the future might be gloomy, but I always say activism itself is hope, and we should rely on that hope, because we would not want to pass on pessimism to the younger generation. We should be able to use the strength and the solidarity to help them to understand that there's light at the end of the tunnel. And so I'd like to thank panelists and thank all of us for that very, very interesting and exciting conversation. Thank you.
Our moderator and the panelists. Let's clap for them. I think it looks like those here are very tired. I didn't hear their clap on this side of the room. Aha, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And that was for the panelists and the moderator, but I want us to thank Professor Jima Bwede as well. He spoke briefly, but very rich as well. Please, let's thank Prof, the father of think tanks, or CSOs in Ghana. We are very grateful. The godfather. It's always a matter of humility and honor for me to say that I had the privilege of being taught by Prof when I was an undergrad at University of Ghana, literally in Ghana politics, and then politics in. Those were some of the courses I really enjoyed under his tutelage. So it was great to hear his voice again, talking about us not falling into the instrumentalization of democracy for prosperity. That was the first one. And then his second major point of finding core issues that we can build Wademos around, that we can advocate for. So thank you very much, Prof, for that. And to the panel, we're very grateful to our moderator, Bernadette French, who is a program coordinator, campaign for good governance in Sierra Leone. We got to get a taste of Sierra Leone, although things are happening over there, but she did great. So Ms. French, thank you so much for that. And to our panelists as well, who graced us with their knowledge. I do think Prof identified one of the major themes. Before we go for lunch, just to bring everything together, the theme of solidarity came up very strongly, so I'm not going to talk too much about it. But I think at the end of the day, the major things that, as we go to lunch, we think about it, and in our next phase, some of the major things, the polarization of CSOs. For me, that's one thing I picked up as far as the concerns regarding how we can strengthen CSOs for democracy. And the words that came up here, the major indicators here was the crisis of integrity, the political affiliation of some of the CSOs, the binary nature of conceptualizing CSOs, either you are with us or against them. And then the false dichotomies, which is a term I picked from Madame since yesterday, but it has also come up today, between the old and the new, and also between different CSOs and the government. So it manifests in different ways as well. So this is the concern as far as polarization is concerned, and we need to start thinking about how to address it. So the panel discussion also talked about how to rebuild and to reform. And the major points that came up here is that we need to see the media as partners and not in an antagonistic way. Our work as CSOs has to be based on data. That was a very strong one as well, so that it's not just people doing things off the cuff. Then partnerships. There are so many words for it. Partnerships, collectivism or working collectively, solidarity, unity. Very, very essential. And then the idea of peer review. Ourselves, peer reviewing ourselves as CSOs also came up strongly. The crisis of integrity. You know, it's not always that you go to meetings that are as introspective as this. But I realized that the light was shown on CSOs that there's a crisis of integrity which has to be addressed. And one of the ways to do that is through patriotism and sanitizing the space. And another way to do it is through organization. Very, very big term, which Prof reminded us of, Professor Prempe reminded us of, which we can always go away with. And then collaboration. Collaboration. Yesterday, collaboration with each other, but today, another facet of collaboration came up was collaborating with professional bodies as far as, and then collaborating with the old version, if I'm allowed to call it so, of civil society organizations, like those who were there before the new versions came, like the TUCs, GMAs, and others, moving forward. Then the concept of citizenship as the true drivers of democratic change also came up very strongly. And here, I would have to pick up one of the quotes that our panelists gave up. I don't have it completely, but he said that if we fail to understand the needs and aspirations of the people, then we'll be failing to really understand how democracy has to work for us. So if the summary has to identify one takeaway quote, this will be it moving forward. And then the last category was about prescriptions and inscriptions. Prescribe, but how do we inscribe those prescriptions on the face of our nations for the people in order for democracy to deliver the goods? How do we inscribe them? And about 3 things came up here. First was that there is an over-concentration on institutions, so we need to think more about people rather than just the institutions. And the second is that we need to develop effective response mechanisms, and very timely too, so that they are able to serve the purpose for which we do the interventions. And lastly, build around this, not just broad ones, but specific ones. And there was a concern about the new developments coming up, like artificial intelligence and climate justice, which I think was worth noting, because this is where the world is moving, and how is that going to really mediate the work of CSOs? How do we think about how to leverage AI, but also the effects of AI? People are using it for so many different things. So how really are we going to grapple with this? So I believe this is another step moving forward. So it has been very, very, very worthwhile. Definitely a very engaging and enriching conversation that we've had, and a lot of things to mumble on as we go for lunch and then come back. Thank you also to all of us who participated by way of questions and by way of comments and feedback to make the conversations as substantive, as solid as we would want them to be. I've definitely also learned and enjoyed the sessions, sitting back and listening. I feel like I'm now part of the CSO world, and I'm thinking about ways in which I can also participate. I may not be in the afternoon, but I just want to thank the organizers for inviting me to be part of this particular session. I really appreciate it, and I do a lot of public discourse analysis, communication analysis, because we believe that our communication also has to be sanitized if we are supposed to have a healthy democracy. So I'll think about how we can also contribute in terms of language to good conversations in order to come up with good policies for our democracy. So I am happy to connect with all of us. to talk about my contact information just in case for later on. I am at the University of Media, Arts and Communications, JIJ, Senior Lecturer, Director of Research, and I do a lot of work in public discourse analysis. So I'll be happy to keep in touch with everybody else. Thank you so much, and enjoy your lunch as well.